going to drive. Victor Scott has just tied this game. His second home run, and no doubter. Ground ball, throw, base hit. One run scores. Here comes Donovan. Nootbaar goes Oppo-Taco for the Cardinals, and they take the lead. The Newts are raining down here at Target Field. Ground ball kicks off the left side of the mound. Flipped to second in time, and the Cardinals somehow, some way, beat the Twins. No sleep, no problem. We head home after winning a series at Target Field.
And I love this one. I mean, you just snatched it from them, to be quite honest. They were doing a really nice job. They got some tough arms, and you're just grinding that whole game. Scott hits to homer and hit it a long ways. Felt good about it. For us to be able to battle back against their closer there, score 2, and then Helsley shut the door, man, that's a really solid win to take the series here.
Chugga, 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 choo-choo. Nobody's actually on board, but it is BK and Ferrario here on a Monday morning with Alex Ferrario and Tanner Hendrickson. I'm Brandon Kiley. Cardinals win 2 out of 3 over the weekend against a legitimately good team up in Minnesota. Alex, here's my place of frustration today. Has very little to do with what we saw from the Cardinals over the weekend, and very little to do with really what we've seen from the Cardinals in the past calendar week. 1 2 out of 3 against Milwaukee, 1 2 out of 3 up in Minnesota. Good work. That's all you can really ask for. Even against the Dodgers, those games were frustrating, don't get me wrong, but you played really competitive baseball against one of the best teams in the sport. You lose 2 games in that series by a combined 2 runs. This 9-game stretch that we've been talking about where you say, hey, the schedule really ramps up. I hope they're ready for this. When we were talking about that, if you had told me, hey, they're going to start this portion of the schedule 5-4, I feel really good about that. Here's the problem, Alex, and this is where my frustration comes for. This is not where they lost their opportunity to make the playoffs this year. It happened before this. These games, at least for me, and I understand if you disagree with it, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line to get involved in the show. The place where this team lost its opportunity to have these games really even matter for me was in Cincinnati when you got swept. It was in Chicago when you lose 3 out of 4 against the dreadful, honestly, Chicago Cubs. And in Pittsburgh, where you lost 2 out of 3 against the Pirates. The bad teams in your own division, all you had to do was take care of business. Win 2 out of 3 against Pittsburgh. Win 3 out of 4 against Chicago. Literally just win 1 against Cincinnati. And if you had done exactly what I just said, you'd be 1 game back right now of the Atlanta Braves. And today we'd be coming in having changed nothing else about the season. It's the same team with the same problems and playing the same mediocre baseball for the most part all season long. And today we'd be coming in here saying, hot damn, everything is in front of this team. They're right in this thing. And because the National League outside of the top 2 teams in the wild card race is so mediocre, you have a real shot right now to be able to make your way into the 3rd wild card spot. But instead, they're still 5 games back with 2 teams in front of them. And so I leave that series from Minnesota over the weekend feeling totally apathetic about the fact that you have won 4 out of 6 against the Milwaukee Brewers and the Minnesota Twins. How did you feel coming off of the weekend, though, Alex?
Kind of like you, maybe a little bit more frustration because like we talked about last week, you just felt this coming to where it was like everyone was saying that they stink and done with it. And then all of a sudden the Cardinals win a couple of games and it's like, oh, see, they're not dead. The second half team is making their comeback. And I'm going to sound like negative Nancy here, and I guarantee I'm going to get a lot of hate on the Graveyard and the Air Comfort Service text line, but like, I'm just not buying into this again. I'm not falling for this trap that is the Cardinals' second half comeback stretch. Like, yeah, you won the series against the Milwaukee Brewers. Bully for you. You did the same thing against the Minnesota Twins. Can I be honest? Safe space right here with our friends.
Of course.
Maybe not BK, but Tanner, I'm looking at you.
You're good, man.
You were gifted the 4 wins that you just pulled out against Milwaukee and Minnesota.
That's baseball. You've gifted wins against other teams. Like, I can't do that.
You gifted it, sure. But you weren't gifted wins against the Chicago Cubs or the Cincinnati Reds or the Tampa Bay Rays. Like, we can get all excited of what you just did against the Milwaukee Brewers and what you just did against Minnesota and what you got coming up with San Diego. But if I'm going to be honest about this team in September when they're still in the race and they take on Cincinnati again, or be damned the Colorado Rockies that just roll in and just find ways to beat you, it's the inconsistency of this Cardinals team. And what bothers me the most about it, I think, And it comes from a place of where I want to see the Cardinals succeed, but I know that if this team finds a way to be in the race and finishes 2 games out of a wild card spot or does get into the wild card, everybody in that front office is going to be high-fiving and shaking hands and saying, congratulations, congratulations, we did our job, we got to the playoffs, and now it's on them to figure it out. And there will be no change from this team. So there is a little bit of frustration with this because it's like, of course this Cardinals team is going to find a way to go on some type of stretch for 2 weeks, get everybody's hopes up, tell us that we're crazy for not buying back in, and then when September rolls around, they fall apart once again, and it's like, well, what happened?
Yeah, I should be excited about winning 2 or 3 against Milwaukee, 2 or 3 against Minnesota, but I just can't when I look at the standings. And, 5 games back, like, you can make up that ground. 5 games back and having to leapfrog 3 teams is a lot tougher to do. And if I'm not mistaken, you've only got the tiebreaker against one of them, and that happens to be the Atlanta Braves. So I don't know. I left the weekend and go, man, you know what? They did their job. They took care of 2 or 3.
Absolutely.
I still got to see more, though, if I'm going to buy back in. Like this San Diego series, win 3 or 4 against them. Then if you go to New York and win 2 or 3, all right, now we're into September. Now you're building some positive momentum. Now I can probably look at you and say, I think I can buy in. But for right now, I'm kind of with Alex. I think 3 of those 4 wins were gifted to you. Now, granted, you got to take advantage of that, and you've got to win those games. But nothing really was that impressive over the weekend outside of their starting pitching. And I've seen their starting pitching doesn't necessarily hold up for the long run. So, I don't know. It's hard for me to get excited about those wins. And I hate to be the guy that's negative on a Monday, but I'm just not buying what we saw.
You know what the sad part is? You say, I don't really think they did anything great. You know what they did great? They didn't swing the bat. They stood at the plate and watched balls go outside the zone and took their walks.
There's some value in that.
There is, but it's just, I think it's kind of ironic and poetic that this team's offense that has sucked all season long is scoring runs and winning games by not taking swings.
314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line from the 636. Guys, so what you're saying is if they just would have won more games, they wouldn't be as bad as they are. I hate this response to what I said earlier about how, hey, if you had taken care of business against the 3 teams on your schedule in your division that are bad, you would be in position right now to be able to potentially be in a wild card spot.
Reminds me of another St. Louis team that just missed the playoffs.
100%. They didn't take care of business.
The Cardinals are the Blues.
It's the same thing. Yeah.
Which is very frustrating, too.
The reason why it's a frustrating response to what I said is because I'm not telling you that they had to be a better team than what they are. What I'm saying is a couple of bounces of the ball going in a different direction, a couple of you taking advantage of opportunities with runners in scoring position. And right now we're talking about this team completely differently, with them being the exact same team. So yes, it would have required them to win games that they ended up losing. Isn't that what we're analyzing every day? I just think it's such a nonsensical response. But anyways, it's something that people said over the weekend. If my aunt had, she'd be my uncle. Like, okay, cool, great response. I'm glad you got your jokes off.
I'm confused by that saying. What's the rest of it?
You can go look it up.
Okay. I'm going to Google this. If my aunt had, you know what? Oh, jeez. Don't Google
You're
that.
learning a little something, all right?
Not safe for work, ladies and gentlemen.
I just look at the National League right now, man. As I watched the Brewers series, that team has won 80 games this year, and I don't understand how. They're 75 and 55 right now. You guys talked about this, I think, on Friday when I was out. I learned more about the Brewers in that series than I did about the Cardinals. I don't think that team's very good. I think they're going to be one and done in the postseason. But I could say that about almost every team that's in the playoff race right now. Like Philadelphia is not playing their best ball, but they're a good team. Atlanta's not very good this year, guys. They are hanging on by a thread. They are doing everything they can to just get to the end of the year. And we all know that's not a team that's going to do anything of meaning in the postseason. The Mets aren't very good. The Giants aren't very good. Like, these teams around you are very similar to what you are. But they've taken advantage of their schedule. They've taken advantage of teams that are below them in the standings in a way that you simply have not. And so as I looked over the weekend, and T-Bone, you talked about the pitching being the one thing that they, for the most part, other than basically one bad inning, once again for Sonny Gray, that got away from him, that's the thing they did really well over the weekend. I'm curious for the text line, 314-399-9646, in the YouTube chat, youtube.com/101ESPNSTL. If you are still optimistic about the 2024 Cardinals, and I'm sure there are some that are, what is the thing that you saw this weekend that leads you to believe that they can end up getting back into this race? Because as we tried to think about this before the show today, one thing that I thought about was, well, maybe it can be the base running stuff. Because I think it was Friday night where they had 4 stolen bases, but then the rest of the weekend they had 0. Maybe it can be Nolan Arenado, who hit .333 over the weekend, but had 0 extra base hits, did not walk a single time, and had 0 RBIs. Maybe it can be the outfield production. We've talked about that a number of times. I'm not sure that's really going to be the thing. Maybe it can be the rotation, but then your ace goes out there and gives up 4 runs in 1 inning and 5 runs overall. I just don't know what that thing is. Maybe it can be the bullpen, but then you look at it, it's like, well, JoJo, the thing over the weekend, and,
It was good on good, though.
Yeah, sure. I just don't know what that thing is for the Cardinals. Like, I can look at some of the Padres, guys. You look at them. Man, that front end of the rotation, hot damn, pretty good. Pretty darn
Don't forget
good.
about that damn bullpen.
You look at the Brewers. Their defense is amazing. Their athleticism on the bases is real, and it shows up in games. Like some of these other teams that even if you want to look at them and say they're not a great team, they've got something they can hang their hat on. What is that thing for the Cardinals? Do you guys have something that I'm missing?
I mean, if you're going to go off of why they've pulled off what they've pulled off in the last 2 series, I guess it would be pitching. But, I don't know how you could sit there and say, I believe because the pitching when your supposed best starting pitcher did still get lit up in a game against the Minnesota Twins that you lost. So, Michaelis looked good against the Milwaukee Brewers. Palante, once again, is looking more like the ace than Sonny Gray is. Eric Fetty had a really good outing. So, if I'm going to look at it and say, well, I guess if I'm going to buy in and put that conductor hat on that we really should have burned a long time ago, I guess it would be the pitching. But I don't know how you can try and argue to me that the pitching is what's going to put the Cardinals in the playoffs, because to me, the pitching is what put the Cardinals in this position.
Yeah, there's nothing I looked at over the weekend. I was just like, yeah, that's it. That's how they turn it around.
But we're trying to find something, T-Bone.
The one thing, if I had to squint and maybe have a magnifying glass to say maybe this is it, is maybe it's the fact that they are drawing walks and look like they're trying to be more aggressive on the base
Better
path.
approach.
Yeah,
I feel like maybe they have fewer black holes in the lineup. I know that sounds crazy and just such a pejorative to say about this team, but not having Nolan Gorman out there over the weekend, I did feel like you kind of felt that.
The future of the Cardinals is in great hands.
Kind of to your point there, it also feels a little bit more like a roster that fits Ollie Marmol. To where
he didn't utilize it yesterday, by the way.
No, but it kind of hurts the case. But he actually now can go to.
His one pinch hitter was actually a pinch runner, and it was Jose Fermin who ran for Nolan Arenado.
By the way, Jose Fermin has been the hero in 2 of these wins for this Cardinals team.
But that's the one thing for me is it's the roster feels a little bit better suited for Marmol. Again, he didn't take advantage of it yesterday, but I think it was on Friday where he used his Luke and Baker to spot. He ends up getting on base twice. Now you're starting to see him mix and match, which is what he wants to do. And he didn't have that capability early on in the year. And I would also say, to your point on the walks, I can't tell if it's just they're seeing bad pitching, which is the arms just don't have it that day, or it's actually their approach. And then they're getting on base and they're trying to manufacture. I mean, Contreras talked about it. He legged out somehow a double on Friday night's game. They steal multiple bases, and you know what? It manufactured runs. Because what this team's not going to do? They're not going to slug. So what do you got to do? You got to have manufactured slug.
They got to have small ball to the greatest degree.
Maybe that's the thing that I can look at and say, if I squint and I cross my fingers, cross my toes, this is how they're going to do it.
Please.
I don't believe that.
Somebody send us a mic drop trying to convince me with that argument, because, God, I would love to hear, well, they're manufacturing slug right now. That's how they're going to get into the... Let me show you what slug looks like when you take on Padres and the Yankees. That's no need to manufacture slug. That's what slug actually looks like.
But you have to find a way. Whether it is real, manufactured, I do not care. Get to 4 runs. Whatever it takes for you to get to 4 runs, that's the magic number for this team more often than not.
Unless Sonny Gray's starting.
At least then you'll have a chance. Unless Sonny Gray's on the mound, in which case you need 5 to 6 runs. But if anybody else is on the mound...
But Lynn's coming back.
Maybe Michaelis is... Sometimes it's going to be 7.
Gibson's been legit.
There you go. Yeah. 4+ runs, you'll have a chance to be able to win that game.
He said 4+ runs.
With Alex and T-Bone on BK. You've got BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN. I promise you, we're not trying to be overly negative. I don't like being negative. It's not particularly fun, especially on a Monday morning. It'd be great if we could come in here and be like, hunky-dory, they won 4 out of 5. They won 2 out of 3 against Minnesota. Coming in on a Monday, going up against San Diego Padres. They're about to get right back into this thing. I just don't believe it. And I'm going to give you guys my honest reaction to
I did this before.
The weekend.
You peer pressured me into put that damn hat on, and I did. And
To be clear, I did not peer pressure you.
Yeah, you did.
You tried to do a bit. It failed.
And
that's why the team is where it is right now. Honestly,
that's on me. Okay, BKO.
I like how people are like, we're super negative. Well, one, we're only negative because we have to talk about them every day.
Yeah, that's
Two,
true.
let's not act like the fan base isn't negative on this team. I've seen Busch Stadium of late. The only reason there's probably going to be more people there tonight is because their favorite manager, Mike Shilt's, back in town.
I can't.
From the 618, you can't say negative stuff every single day on your show and say that we're not trying to be negative. You're negative about the Cardinals. Just admit it. I don't believe in the Cardinals, and therefore, some of the things that we have to say about them, many of them, end up skewing negative. They did this to themselves by the way that they played August 12th through August 14th against the Cincinnati Reds on the road when they scored 4 runs in 3 days in one of the best hitters' parks in Major League Baseball. Lost those 3 games, went from 60-58 to start that series to 60-61 to end it, and essentially ended all playoff hopes. Because as they were losing, other teams around them in the National League were winning, and that ended up being the series to me that you can look back on and say, similar to the Blues where they lost to San Jose, and that was it. It was over from there. The Cincinnati series for me was when I came in on that Thursday after it and said, I don't know that we need to talk about this team as a playoff team anymore. There's just no reason to. So that is why we skew negative. So for Alex Ferrario and Tanner Hendrickson, I'm Brandon Kiley. There was a positive over the weekend. It probably isn't what you're thinking about. We'll talk about it next year on 101 ESPN. With Alex and T-Bone on BK, so there was a positive story over the weekend, but it's probably not what you think it was for the St. Louis Cardinals. And I want to say this on the front end. I genuinely feel bad for this guy, and it sucks that he's going to be out for a while. But Willson Contreras, fractured middle finger, he's going to be out for the foreseeable future. The positive to me, Alex, is that the Cardinals are about to get some legitimate answers on Ivan Herrera. And this is something that they have needed for a while. I do not like the way that they've handled Ivan Herrera this season. Haven't understood it. Doesn't make sense to me. He was a good bat for you. I feel like his arm issues have been vastly overstated. The Cardinals have been getting run on from day one of the season till where we are today, regardless of who's behind the plate. I think it involves the pitchers being slow to the plate. I think it involves their guys at second base, maybe not putting down the greatest tags. And yes, some of the blame also goes to the catchers who haven't been great about throwing out runners. And some of that is on Ivan Herrera, no doubt about it. But you look at what's happened while Pedro Pajes has been back there, a guy that is known for his defensive ability. It hasn't been significantly better. I think they've allowed the same number of base stealers on the season now with where they're at respectively. So Ivan Herrera back up with a big league club, didn't get the start yesterday. My anticipation is he's probably going to be in the old Pedro Pajes role where it'll be like one game every series. You'll see him behind the plate and then occasionally probably getting some DH opportunities. I wish he would be the everyday catcher with Pedro just staying in his old role and you could just reverse it. He goes into the Willson Contreras role. They're not going to do that. The reason why I'm happy that we're finally getting these answers, Alex, is because they need to find out going into the offseason what their plan is with Ivan Herrera. Is he a guy that you can actually trust behind the plate? If the answer is no, either trade him or find a new position for him. Should he be your MJ Melendez, who was a catching prospect for the Kansas City Royals, and they realized we're just never going to trust this guy to be behind the plate, and we've got other catchers that we trust, so we're going to try him in the outfield. I don't know if the outfield's a place that Ivan Herrera eventually goes. Maybe try him at first base. And if you want that bat, if you want to be able to potentially platoon that spot where maybe it's Ivan Herrera and Alec Burleson playing at first, going truly a young platoon there, cool. Sounds great, man. Get him some opportunities at DH. Maybe he starts once a week behind the plate. You just got the utmost versatility with him. I want to see what he looks like. Get him as many at-bats as humanly possible prior to Willson Contreras' return to the lineup. So it sounds strange that an injury was a quote-unquote positive for the team, but because I'm looking more big picture with him and less about the immediacy of what the here and now means, I thought this, for the long-term trajectory of the Cardinals, is something that can eventually be a positive or at least a silver lining for the team right now.
I think it should be. My problem is it's not going to be, because I think you're just going to see Pedro Pajes as the primary catcher and Ivan Herrera is going to get occasional at-bats as a backup catcher or maybe DH here and there, but since you're only got two catchers, I just don't see it. I think offensively they know exactly who Ivan Herrera is, which it's been kind of my gripe with the Cardinals for the longest time. It's like you say you need a guy who can hit against lefties. Well, Ivan Herrera is a bat for you, but you refuse to use that because you can't carry three catchers, but you don't want to have two and use a guy as the DH when they've done that already. It's just really strange to me. I don't think you need to learn anything else about Ivan Herrera. Ivan Herrera was a perfectly acceptable bat for you, and he's 24 years old. So offensively, he's just going to improve, but he has shown you the ability to hit at the major league level. I think what the Cardinals have told you about keeping him in the minors is we don't trust him defensively as a catcher, and so we're not going to play him. Pajes gets the starts over him. And I just don't see, Pajes has found ways to have really good at-bats. He's found ways to hit at the major league level. I don't trust Ollie to look at Ivan Herrera and say, all right, you're here. Let's put you in the lineup and see what you got. I think this is going to be, you're the backup catcher.
I agree.
And you're not going to see anything. And you're not going to shift him to a different position when you're still competing right now until they believe that they're mathematically eliminated, which by that time, Willson Contreras might be back. So I just don't buy any of it. I think right now you're at the position where they're looking at this as, look, we might need to just trade Ivan Herrera because Pajes is Wally pipped him as the backup catcher because he's better defensively. And it seems they view it, we don't need the offense bat from him, which is just odd to me.
Yeah, I hope they get him some reps behind home plate because I don't believe he had a noodle arm. You know, I think he had a little bit of that, but as we've seen with Pajes, it's not like it's just an Ivan Herrera problem. Pajes is getting run on just as bad as Ivan Herrera was. Contreras is the only guy that they have a hope against. So maybe it's those guys' arms, or maybe it is the pitchers are slow to the plate. My tinfoil on this, he got miscast in the Willson Contreras role from last year, except there wasn't talk about him going to the outfield. They just said go to AAA. And what I mean by that is I think you saw the pitchers didn't trust Ivan Herrera with game calling. That's my guess on what happened here, because it's clearly not the stolen base thing, because it's still a major problem. So I want to see him behind the plate to see if it actually is Ivan Herrera, see if we hear positive things about the way he calls a game. And I really don't want to trade him in the offseason because he's got a big league bat. He's 1% above league average here at the big leagues. I hope if he isn't starting behind the plate in games, they're willing to use him as a pinch hitter because he can come off of the bench and give you a quality AB. I would much rather find another position for him if they don't think catcher is the long-term answer, whether that means putting him at first and platooning him with Burleson next year, or putting him in the outfield, or hell, just give him ground balls at like second base or something. I don't care what the position is. He has a big league bat. You should be keeping that for an organization that looks at their baseball reference page. Oh, yeah, some of their big league hitters that they thought were developing are in the minors again, and Walker and Gorman. This guy can play at the big leagues. Find him a position, whether that's catcher or somewhere else. He should not be traded in the offseason because they should be pushing towards a youth movement.
Yeah, I'm totally with you guys, and you don't learn first base on the job right now. Like, this is not the time to do that.
This is an off-season thing for the change.
Off-season is when you could potentially do something like that. Now is the time where you can find out if the bat plays. And you have so few options right now for you, like offensively, that are making a meaningful difference. Give him a chance, man. The other thing about Herrera, and this is a similar conversation to what we had with Jordan Walker, he's actually not a great platoon option because, much like Jordan Walker, for his career, he's been better against righties than he has been against lefties. So maybe the move here is just use him as a DH regularly. I know Matt Carpenter has actually been fine. I'd be fine if you decided to use Matt Carpenter at first base, Alec Burleson at times in the outfield, while Donovan is now at second. And then you have Ivan Herrera as your DH. They won't do that because they have this terrible fear of losing a catcher in game, then losing the DH. I don't like the way that they manage it, but they did it a little bit more with Willson Contreras and Pedro Pajes lately, and then they've been pinch hitting for their DH lately. So maybe they'll be willing to do this.
You know they're going to revert back to themselves because they almost had it happen over the weekend, where Contreras goes out with the broken finger, then Pajes gets drilled in the neck with a Sonny Gray. Yeah, Lucan Baker's a backup catcher.
I don't blame. That's a whole lot of territory to cover as a catcher. Well, they're not throwing outside the zone with him.
Well, they said, hey, listen, we're not putting Donnie back there. And I don't blame them. They shouldn't. He is technically the emergency catcher.
Poor Lucan Baker. They were like, hey, your body is willing to just be sacrificed in this game if you get injured. We're not doing that with someone else.
That's like when you're a special teamer in the NFL. Hey, man, you're making $1 million. Go out there and sacrifice for us. It's a hard way to make a living, but that's the way to do it. If you're Lucan Baker, you're like, hey, man, I'm up here in the big leagues. I'm getting service time right now. This is great. And if you need me to if you need me to eat some innings for you at the end of a blowout game and I got to go out there and throw batting practice, essentially, cool, I'll do that. You need me to be the guy that goes out and catches every first pitch the rest of the way? In. You need me to be your emergency catcher? I'm willing to do it. Whatever you need, I am here for you.
Keep me off those buses in AAA.
The other reason why I brought up potentially playing Matt Carpenter or Burleson, whoever, at first base right now, is because Goldie has now been out for 2 of the last 4 games. Small sample size. It's the first time, though, all season that he's missed 2 games in any individual week, where he has been out for multiple games. And I think in part that's because Goldie in his last 18 games is 10 for 65 with an OPS of 525. On base percentage in this last 65 at-bats, 235. A 235 on base, a slugging percentage below 300. If you look month by month this season, it's been his worst month, statistically speaking, of the year. It's not getting better. This is who Paul Goldschmidt is, and it is time for them to, past time, honestly, for them to admit as much. And that means a lot more off days moving forward for Paul Goldschmidt. You can use him coming off of the bench. He's still been good against left-handed pitching. If you get a lefty reliever coming in and you got one of your lefty bats coming up, cool. Go ahead and put Paul Goldschmidt into the game in that spot to potentially do some damage. But otherwise, Alex, I would love to see them for the foreseeable future. More Ivan Herrera. Can't believe I'm saying this. More Matt Carpenter. A lot of Alec Burleson in your left-handed bats, and let's see what they can look like.
I mean, you can't deny the success you've had in these last 2 series, and the usage of Paul Goldschmidt has been very limited, and you've been winning baseball games. So if you're going to go down the path of, well, we need to keep doing what we're doing because we're winning baseball games, Paul Goldschmidt's only coming in against certain pitchers, and if I'm Ollie, I stick to that.
In the next 4 games, you've got 4 right-handed starters, by the way. So these are not going to be good opportunities for Paul Goldschmidt to get in.
Don't be a hypocrite, Ollie. You did it with Walker. Paul Goldschmidt only plays against left-handed pitchers.
I'd be fine with it.
I would too.
I don't buy it, by the way.
I think if you're trying to sell the notion of we're still in this and we're trying to get to the playoffs, Paul Goldschmidt doesn't start against right-handed pitching. He hasn't been good against righties this year. We've seen the decline. The age curve has finally hit him. He does have a role in the team. I'm not like I'm trying to tell you he needs to take the Brandon Crawford role where you never see him. But he shouldn't start against righties unless they're throwing low velo. I bet he's got decent numbers against low velo righties. But guys that have some speed and some good spin, you can just see it with your eye. He's overmatched. So if they're selling, whether it be they're trying to win or they want to play the young guys, I'm sorry, but there's no reason Paul Goldschmidt starts against right-handed pitching right now unless somebody actually needs a breather at first base.
Somebody on the text line said, guys, have you really suggested that the Cardinals platoon Burleson next year? Do you even listen to yourselves?
Sometimes I don't. But it's mostly because I have to prep to not listen to BK. And so I just tune myself out.
I did indeed suggest that the option might be to platoon Alec Burleson. I don't know if that's going to be the best utilization of him, but at first base, especially if they want to go that route, I wouldn't mind it. Alec Burleson's been one of your worst hitters on the roster this season against left-handed pitching. Let me give you his numbers. I just told you the numbers for Paul Goldschmidt in the month of August, right? What was it, a 528 OPS this month, I think, or something
like that. It was like a 235 on base.
Yeah, 235 on base, 528 OPS. We all agree, not good enough, right?
Yeah, that's pretty bad.
No. On the season against left-handed pitching, Alec Burleson has a 233 on base percentage and a 532 OPS. Alec Burleson against lefties this year has been what Paul Goldschmidt has been this month against everybody that he's faced. So yeah, if you wanted to platoon him next year, there's every reason to do so. I think early on they should give him the opportunities against lefties to find out what he looks like. He's a young player. He could get better. I don't think that the approach was a problem. I think the results just weren't there for him this season. If you like this season, find out, okay, it's not coming together. By May, maybe you do look at more of a platoon option. And if you start seeing some stuff, maybe it's with the cages, whatever, and it says, hey, this guy might be able to get this thing figured out against lefties, then give him more opportunities. But what I'm saying is that has to be on the table next season. And if it is, one of the guys that could do some of that for you is Ivan Herrera. That's really it. And you have opportunities right now to find out if that's a good way to go about it next season. With Alex and T-Bone, I'm BK. Coming up in about 15 minutes or so, we'll get into questions and answers. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line to get involved in the show. But coming up next, there was a big upset over the weekend in college football. What did we learn from that, and how do we apply it to the rest of the season? We'll talk about it next year on 101 ESPN. This is the time of the year that I love, Alex. It's time for all of the futures bets that you can place for college football, for the NFL. You want to be placing those over on the Circa Sportsbook in Illinois. This is the place that Alex and I decided to bet on. Why? Because we're getting better odds over there. They've got the tight money line splits that we've told you guys all about. They've got great customer service. And maybe most importantly, when you win, they're not going to place limits on you like some of these other books that are out there. You're going to win the most money possible. They suggest going out there, checking out the lines elsewhere, see if you can find a better offer from FanDuel, from DraftKings. They believe that over time, you're going to get the best odds possible with Circa Sports in Illinois.
I love that transparency that they have to where they tell you to go check out those other apps because they know you'll always come back. BK mentioned those futures bets, making sure that you're not getting limited based off of your winnings. Other sports betting apps do that, not Circa Sports. Download the app today and plan to use it all football season long and bring in the most money possible like BK and Ferrario do on the Circa Sports Illinois app. If you or someone you know may have a problem with gambling, call 1-800-GAMBLER or text ILGAMB to 833-234.
Tanner Hendricks, Near Thursday Sports Center update driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. Cardinals beat the Twins last night 3-2 as they take 2 of 3 from Minnesota, and they return home tonight for a 4-game set with the San Diego Padres. 6:45 will be first pitch, and Kyle Gibson will be on the mound for St. Louis. The Sports Center update is driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. See them at londoff.com. Chevy, together we drive. Are you kidding me?
That was the call on ESPN over the weekend as Georgia Tech comes away with a big upset. First weekend of the year in college football, week 0, and Florida State gets upset overseas against Georgia Tech. With Alex Ferrario and Tanner Hendrickson, I'm Brandon Kiley. You've got BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN. Alex, every year we go into the season and we've got these expectations. We feel like we know what these teams are, and then you get into the season, you're like, whoa. Okay, Florida State, a team that went undefeated last year prior to their quarterback going down to the final game of the regular season, opens up the year against Georgia Tech, of all teams, and gets beat on a walk-off kick. That is not something a lot of people saw coming over the weekend. And yet, it's exactly what happened. And I feel like there were some lessons to be learned here. Maybe don't apply them necessarily to, like, Mizzou, but for college football at
Don't apply them to Mizzou, guys. Not until Thursday.
Guess my lesson's probably not going to apply to them.
I do have one of these fears for the University of Missouri. We'll get to that here in a minute. I feel like the place that we often overlook when it comes to evaluating teams going into the season, because it's one thing to say, like, okay, here are your skill players. Here's what you got in the defensive backfield. Here's the returning production, so on and so forth. The places that are most difficult to do that for are the offensive and the defensive line. And in that game over the weekend, when I was watching Florida State, I feel like we all have the same reaction to this. Florida State's offensive line was a disaster, and their defensive line could not stop the run. They had no chance. And when you're going up against a team like Georgia Tech, that is very difficult to prepare for. They threw 16 passes in that game, Alex, and won the game because they were running the ball from start to finish. 36 carries for $190 on the ground and 3 touchdowns rushing. That was the key to victory for Georgia Tech. It wasn't hard to figure out. The reason why was because Florida State couldn't stop it. They had no chance. A year ago, they would have, man. They had pros. T-Bone's got 4 of them, I think, on his roster in L.A. right now. They took all of the Florida State defensive linemen. That's no longer the case, and you looked at it in this game. They were getting moved in the running game, and I think it's something we overlook far too often. I will be curious to see who the next team is that we look at this Saturday, this Thursday night, whatever it is in college football, and say to ourselves, oh, man, we underestimated the gap between where they were at the line of scrimmage and where they are right now at the line of scrimmage. And those are the teams that are going to take a step back. And in vice versa, the teams that upgraded on the offensive and defensive lines, those are typically the ones that end up winning. It's a line of scrimmage sport, and Florida State lost at that spot over the weekend.
Yeah, that was the part that stuck out to me for just how rough that was for Florida State. And honestly, when you have that much turnover, I mean, we talk about it in pro sports, but college feels like it's even more because you're in unison with guys for so long, and then one offseason, you're talking about having a massive overhaul like they did. It felt like that offensive line was just knocked down multiple times, and you could never get anything going if you were Florida State, which is why it felt like such a lost opportunity for Florida State in their first game. That was the first thing for me, too, was like when you have that much turnover, you're going to be talking about a team that's going to be in a rough spot all year long.
And the other one for me, and it probably ties a little bit into the offensive line because I never thought this guy looked comfortable. If you have as BK and the kids would call it, a mid quarterback in DJ Uiagalelei,
yeah.
He's not a guy that can save you when your team is kind of reeling, you know? And I think you saw that this weekend. Last year, they had an elite quarterback in Jordan Travis, and then he got hurt, and we know how the season ends. But Jordan Travis was the kind of quarterback that wins them that football game over the weekend, to where your team's struggling.
He finds a way.
But he finds a way. He does something special.
In the first half, DJ Uiagalelei had in terms of where he was throwing the ball, how far down the field he was throwing it, it was behind the line of scrimmage on average.
And that tells me if those were plays that were designed that way, and I'm not sure that all of them were, but some definitely were, it tells me the coaching staff doesn't believe in DJ Uiagalelei. You know, they just want him to get the ball out of their hands and that they hope that their playmakers in space can make something happen. But that was one thing for me was, you know, when we start talking about teams coming into the season, you have to look at their quarterback position and go, okay, could that guy win you a football game if things aren't going your way? And for DJ Uiagalelei, the answer is no. Yep. You know, and that's one thing that I've mentioned this before about Missouri. You mentioned them, although our lessons don't apply to them, I was told. But
yeah, they're not. Come on, man.
The defensive line is the thing that I like. As I was watching Florida State over the weekend, I was thinking to myself, man, am I underestimating the loss of Darius Robinson on the Missouri defensive line? Because that is a NFL player now that ended up going in the top 50 selections of this year's draft. He made a lot of difference for them on the defensive line a year ago. Now you don't have that dude on your defensive line. How much is that going to make you take a step back? That was one lesson that I did apply to Missouri from this weekend while watching Florida State.
Undefeated.
Hopefully it doesn't matter.
And the quarterback won. And again, I don't think it's going to be an issue for Missouri, but it's the one that I say, like, can Brady Cook win you a football game if things are going wrong? I don't know. I think he kind of falls into like the middle tier of quarterbacks of, you know, he's good. He's not great at anything, but he's good at everything. Can that guy win a football game for you if things are going wrong? And I think that's one thing to where if the defense takes a step back or, you know, the running game's not there for the Missouri Tigers this year, that is one thing that I do question of, is Brady Cook the guy that's capable of lifting them up over the top? Because if you saw over the weekend, DJ Uiagalelei was not capable of doing it, and it's why Florida State's already on the back burner of our minds for the college football playoffs.
I know Ohio State had a quarterback last year that wasn't capable of doing it, but they also had a couple of receivers last year that elevated him, including Marvin Harrison Jr., who's one of the best players in college football a year ago. It's one of my questions about them going into this season. Oregon, I think they've got a quarterback that's better going into this season in Dylan Gabriel than what they had last year in Bo Nix. And yes, I understand Bo Nix was a first-round quarterback. I don't think he was actually a first-round talent. Denver does weird stuff.
Shut your mouth.
But, like, if you go into this season and you look back on it and you think to yourself, all right, like, Penn State, what was the biggest issue for them a year ago? It looked a lot like what we saw on Saturday with Florida State. So I'm totally with you, T-Bone. Some of these teams where, especially if they have a young quarterback that's starting for the first time or a transfer quarterback that you think, oh, now they're in a better situation, they will then be better. It's not always the case, man. Sometimes you get a guy like DJ Uiagalelei that goes from Oregon State, where he was a caretaker of the offense, and they won with a running game and defense, and they go to Florida State, where you think better situation. He's had the opportunity now. Let's see what he looks like in this offense. You're like, okay, it's going to be good. And then you see it for the first time, you're like, oh, I remember all of this stuff from his previous stints, both at Clemson and at Oregon State. It's the same dude. He's just wearing a different uniform now. And I think sometimes we overstate just how much these guys will improve upon their new arrival. I feel that way, especially about Ohio State. I've seen Will Howard, man. He's fine. He's the definition of fine. I am fascinated to see what that means for a team in Ohio State that is in an all-in season. And if they don't win right now, dude, Ryan Day is getting fired after the season. This will be it. And he hitched his wagon to a guy that is the definition of a character.
And I think this is what's going to make this college football season so interesting. You know, last year was interesting because, like, look at the quarterback talent. I mean, look at last year's quarterback class. You went, wow, this is going to be fun. This year, look at what I just described. How many guys are difference makers that we know of in college football this season? You know, there's a couple freshmen that are going to get starts. There's a couple
legit
transfers.
Difference makers?
Yeah, like there's not a ton.
Jalen Milroe.
Milroe would be one.
And how often are those difference makers transferring to a new school and having the success? Because I feel like more often than not, those guys don't have success.
And I feel like we saw a decent number of them last year.
I would put Milroe, and I think like Gabriel, I would say is like close to that.
I guess.
Like that's it.
I think he's good.
Quinn Ewers.
Like I don't know if Carson Beck's a guy that's a difference maker.
I don't think so. He's good. He's a good quarterback. He's super efficient, but he's not like the quarterbacks that we saw last year. Those dudes were difference makers that ended up going like at the top of the draft. I don't know if I can say that about most of these guys. Like,
and I think that's what's going to make this fascinating is I think you're going to see a lot of teams.
Brady Cook.
That are relax.
My Z, baby.
I think you're going to see a lot of teams that are in this preseason top 12. I think you see like three to four fall out of this thing because of that quarterback situation.
That's why we said coming into this college football season, it felt like a lot of what this past March Madness bracket was, where it was like you don't have superior teams to where it's like, oh, this one's going to be tough. It feels like there's a lot closer of competition this year because of what T-Bone just said.
Last year was the year of the quarterback. There's no doubt about that. You looked back at the standings at the end of the season, the rankings at the end of the year, and you're like, okay, the teams that ended up making it the furthest did so because they had future first-round quarterback talent. Like Georgia, future first-round quarterback. Jalen Milroe, I think, has a chance to be that, depending on how the development goes from here. Oregon had that. Texas potentially has that. I don't believe in him, but other people do. Washington, Michigan. They all had future first-round picks at that position. I think this year is going to be back to what it was a couple of years ago, where it's like, okay, offensive, defensive line, we're getting back to that this season, and do you have a great running game? So that's what it's going to come down to, and we'll see which teams end up emerging victorious accordingly. All right, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line to get involved in the show. Katie Wu will join us coming up at 12 o'clock. Questions and Answers is next here on 101 ESPN.
Alex Ferrario with you to talk about my friends over at Rhino Shield. I was doing all the yard work over the weekend, working outside, cleaning off the siding, and then, of course, my neighbor came over and was chit-chatting with me just about the yard work, and he was talking with me about the exterior of our home. We have brick in the front and siding on the sides of it, and on the brick, he was talking about how brand new it looked, and I explained to him that, yeah, Rhino Shield did that 3 years ago when we first purchased the home, and he was amazed by that, and I explained to him, like, Rhino Shield is so much different than just using some type of paint at a hardware store, or most painting companies just use paint. What Rhino Shield uses is a ceramic coating that sticks 8 to 10 times thicker than anything else you're going to put on the exterior of your home. And the most important part is it sticks to whatever you've got. Aluminum, asbestos, block, brick, whatever you've got, Rhino Shield is going to work for your home. It's 100% waterproof. It deflects 90% of the UV rays. What all of that means is no matter the element, Rhino Shield is protected, and it's going to withstand all of those. It's backed by a 25-year transferable warranty. Check them out today. Darren will come out for you, give you a free estimate, walk you through the whole process. It's incredible work that Rhino Shield does. 877-25-RHINO, 877-25RHINO.com.
314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line for questions and answers. You guys get your questions in now. We will get our questions in to Katie Woo coming up here in just a few minutes. Let's start with this from the 314. Guys, Luke Korak quoted Army today saying he might not be done making moves before training camp. Do you believe that Army will pull off another significant move before we get to camp? I think that question was, or I think that answer was before or after the last moves that they made. I think that was part of that press conference.
Yeah, I was going to say, I didn't see anything from Lou, the piece that he put out today, just talking about how Army set up Steen.
So I think that might have been in relation to like the entry level deals,
why
like
he
what
did
they just
those.
did.
Yeah.
So I think they're probably done in terms of significant moves, but you could see some of these like PTOs.
That's what I was going to say. Yeah, I mean, because typically Armstrong's not afraid and does. Most of the time when guys get PTOs, and a lot of people know Doug Armstrong has offered those up in the past, that's typically Army's got a good relationship with the agent. The agent wants his player to get some reps and so he can get to camp and do it. To me, there's no move that the Blues need to make right now. You've got all of the competition. Unless you're making a blockbuster trade of an NHL player for another NHL player, I think the team is set right now with who they've got in the competition.
Yeah, I don't see any move. And, like, right now, their roster's crowded, to your point. So if they're making a move, it's probably to trade, like, one player out, and it's probably just for, like, a draft pick.
From the 314, guys, barring any injuries, do you think that the 2025 opening day rotation will be Gray, Michaelis, Fedde, Mats, and Palante? I do not. I don't know specifically what will change in that rotation, but I think at least one of those arms is not in your rotation next year, and I think you will have one of the young guys as the replacement. I think the most likely one to be removed is Mats, probably because he's going to be in the bullpen. Yeah, I do not think they're going to trade him.
To me, I think there's two guys that I would say are guaranteed spots for next year. It would be Fedde and Palante, and then from there, I don't know the rest.
I think that's fair.
Yeah, see, I would go Gray's guaranteed.
I'm not so sure on that.
I'm not either, especially for the
this is
spike.
speculation, but 2 years, $60 million, if they could potentially trade that, if they go full youth movement, maybe they consider it. I don't know that they will. I doubt it, but I'm at least leaving the door open.
I think Fetty's the one they can move on from. I mean, $7 million, easy
Totally
to
fair.
trade. I would say Gray's a lock, but I would agree with you. I think you're going to see some kind of change to that rotation. Make it for a young guy. I guess. Problem is, like, I don't know if I want to see McGreevy or Graceffo in the rotation, if I'm being honest. So
if they're going youth movement, I definitely do.
I could see that. I could see where they end up trading one of those guys, but I would say Fetty's the one for me they move.
All right, let's get out of here on this. Quick answers only. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line. Guys, which young quarterback do you think will have a breakout season this year in the NFL? I'll go Kyler Murray. I don't feel like he's had a true breakout just yet. I think this could be the year that we see it.
T-Bone, go, because I'm trying to think right now.
I don't know if he counts since it's his rookie year, but I think Drake May is going to have a good year. I think he's looked impressive from what we've seen with the New England Patriots in the preseason.
I'm going to go Knicks with Denver.
Oh, wow.
I like it.
It's bold.
Do I need a reason?
I mean, that's bold, so sure.
I don't really have one.
Okay, coming up next, Katie Woo, Cardinals insider for The Athletic here on 101 ESPN. A positive overall weekend for the St. Louis Cardinals. They won 2 out of 3. They did win 2 out of 3 against Milwaukee as well. Won 4 out of their last 5 games, the first time that they've done that since the 4th of July. They did win 3 straight for the first time since late June. So generally speaking, a lot of things to be excited about. Unfortunately, the team still finds itself 5 games back in the National League wildcard race, and that is the backdrop to our conversation with Katie Woo, Cardinals insider for The Athletic. You can find her great work over there, where she had 3 takeaways from the weekend, and on Twitter at Katie J. Woo. Katie, we appreciate the time as always. One thing that I did not mention there was the Willson Contreras injury. That is the biggest news from the weekend, so let's start there. What does this mean for the way that the Cardinals are going to approach the catching situation moving forward?
Yeah, guys, great to hear from you on yet another Monday. Let's talk some Contreras, because that is a brutal development for this Cardinals team. We've talked all season about the offense and how it has really just not been all that good. Contreras' .849 OPS led all Cardinals regulars. So obviously his absence yet again is a glaring one. Now, the Cardinals have been here before, at least, if there's a silver lining at all. And they're going to rely again on their 2 rookie backstops in Pedro Pages and Ivan Herrera. I do think, and we've yet to talk to, or at least I have yet to talk to Ollie Marmol in full about this since they've returned from Minnesota. I do think we're going to see Pages get the majority of the reps, because he is arguably the best defensive catcher. His framing is good. I mean, there's obviously going to be ways you can improve with the running game, but we'll see that with Herrera even more so. What Herrera does bring to the table is that bat. So the question that Ollie Marmol and his coaching staff has to answer in Contreras' absence is, what are they going to value more, defense behind the plate or offense? They're going to have to find a way to supplement or make up for the lack of Contreras' offensive production. Luckily, you have Arenado starting to figure things out in August. But that's the biggest question for them, is what's going to be more important, ensuring that you have stable defense behind the plate or adding another bat to hopefully score some more runs?
Katie, going down that hypothetical path, because you're in the same line of thinking as I am, to where we're going to see a lot of Pages and not so much Ivan Herrera. If they go down that route, does that mean we kind of know what they believe Ivan Herrera is in terms of a backup catcher, and he might be on another team by next season?
You know, I wouldn't go that far, though I certainly understand the sentiment. I just think, he's still so young. And the biggest gripe about Herrera is just the fact that he's struggling to control the run game. And that's been a problem for the Cardinals all season. Certainly Herrera can improve there. You also have to question, are the Cardinals pitchers putting themselves in positions to track down the run game? I think what we've seen actually more than Herrera is just a really big development for Pedro Pages, who has really molded himself into a respectable catcher in his rookie year. I think we'll see a lot more of him going forward, and this is a big opportunity for him to say, hey, I can be more than a backup. Contreras, obviously, he's versatile. He can DH for you guys when needed, too. So that's where I'm looking at it. Now, look, the runway for Contreras to return is short. There are about 5 weeks left in the season. There's still no timetable for Contreras' return. He's set to undergo more testing today in St. Louis to further kind of evaluate what that fractured middle finger looks like. I talked to him briefly Saturday night, and his initial belief was that he did not feel like he would need surgery, although that has not been officially ruled out. I think Contreras' timetable will help dictate what the playing time will be for Pages and Herrera going forward. Right now, though, guys, based on the standings and the, 5 weeks left in the regular season, Ollie Marmol is going to go with the best bat, or either the best bat or the best arm, depending on what the game needs at the time. So I do think we'll see a mix-up of those guys.
We're talking to Katie Woo. She's the Cardinals insider for The Athletic. She joins us each and every Monday here on BK and Ferrario. Katie, Paul Goldschmidt over the weekend only got in, or I guess in the last 4 games, rather, not just over the weekend. He started 2 of the last 4 games. It's the first time this season that he has been out for multiple games in any individual week. Is this something that you view as a potential trend over the next few weeks, or was this a rare situation where he got a couple of off days? How did you view that in terms of their usage of Goldie?
Yeah, BK, that's a great point and something I was wondering as well. I did not make the trip to Minnesota over the weekend, so have yet to have a chance to talk to Goldschmidt or Ollie Marmol about what that situation was, but I can say it's noteworthy. In the 4 years I've been here, I can't remember Goldschmidt sitting twice in 1 week at all. And look, this is a guy that's been about as open and accountable as you can get about his lack of performance. And right now, again, just like we said about the cashing situation, the Cardinals they have no time, and they can't afford to lose any of these games. If you're Ollie Marmol and you're making your lineup based on the best quality of the bats, Paul Goldschmidt's quality of at-bats haven't been all that great lately, and he'd be the first to say it. Now, given what he means to the organization and the weight he carries in that clubhouse and just his stature as a professional, you want Goldschmidt in the lineup every day. He's by far your best defensive first baseman, but it goes down to, is he producing in moments that matter? He'd be the first to say he's not. So it's an interesting thing to watch over the weekend. I'm not sure if it's more of a storyline or just trying to build in some rest. We'll certainly see. But look, Alec Burleson has done everything right to make sure that he's a mainstay in the lineup. I never really agreed with the opportunity or the choice to platoon him. I don't think they'll be doing that in the future. So it's an opportunity, again, for guys who are taking good quality of at-bats. You're thinking Tommy Pham, Lars Nootbaar looks a lot better to get more consistent playing time. Whether that comes at the expense of Paul Goldschmidt remains to be seen, but I do think we'll have a better indication of that playing time over the next 4 games because this 4-game set against the Padres is about as pivotal as it gets.
So, Katie, I remain skeptical about this Cardinals team despite them picking up back-to-back series wins. No surprise there. But if you weren't a skeptic and you watched what they did against Milwaukee and Minnesota and said, okay, this team has figured it out. If you're investing optimism into this Cardinals team, what is it about them that you're optimistic?
I think it's that they're finding ways to win regardless of how chaotic the week that was, right? You're thinking about where this team was a week ago, not looking very good, very grim. Jordan Walker was just optioned to the minors. Nolan Gorman, same situation 1 day later. But look, the Brewers, we know how good they are. The Twins, playoff team, or at least a playoff caliber team as well. That the Cardinals were able to string together 2 pivotal series wins with really solid pitching. I mean, standout job by Andre Palante yet again. In my opinion, he's been the most effective starting pitcher in the second half. Eric Fetty, his best start as a Cardinal on Sunday. You can't ask for better starting pitching performances than what those 2 gave you. And look, you have to, at least at this point in the season, understand the offense is what it is. So if you're going to have to get creative to score, I thought the Cardinals did a great job in doing that on Friday, although they did squander some opportunities in scoring position. They still found ways to generate 6 runs in ways that, maybe aren't as orthodox that you've seen in offense. But then you also saw in the 9th inning, you force teams to make a mistake. The Twins did that on what I thought off the bat was a game-ending double play ball, and we were all going to be rolling our eyes and groaning and sad about it. But because they forced and had a pretty aggressive approach, they forced the Twins to make a mistake and they capitalized on it. So at this point of the season, guys, it doesn't matter how you win the games. It just matters that you win the games, and the Cardinals are doing a nice job at that.
We're talking to Katie Woo for just another couple of minutes here on 101 ESPN. Katie, the fighting Mike Shildt are in town for the next few days.
Brandon.
Padres are going on a bit of a heater right now. They are one of the best teams in the National League. They and the Diamondbacks have pulled away significantly from that 3rd spot in the wild card. I am curious because Shildt being back in town gives us an opportunity to look back at what was a significant decision in the trajectory of this franchise to fire him here in St. Louis. As we now look back at that 3 years ago, what are some of your lasting memories of it, and how do you think that day is now remembered compared to when it first happened?
It's that 2021 season was my first season on the Cardinals beat, and I just remember after that 17-game winning streak and a wild card game that was one of the best baseball games I've seen in person, just sitting down and being ready to decompress about the season. And joke was on me because about 1 day later, out of nowhere, it seemed they fired Mike Shildt. And still, I think there is a lot of question, a lot of controversy onto how that decision came to play. And I think the Cardinals have chosen to remain silent on this for a reason. And I think the fact that Mike Shildt was able to find a new job and be a manager again says to some of the work that maybe he's done over the last 2 years to ensure that he doesn't end up in the same opportunity as 2021. I mean, it was difficult all around. What Mike Shildt did for this organization, I mean, he was a Cardinals lifer, really helped develop their farm system and player development. You're looking at some of the guys, especially in 22 and 23 that we saw come to fruition. He had some sort of hand in their development. So it's unfortunate. I do think, though, that it's unfair in a way to characterize that decision, especially because we haven't seen how this year ends yet. I will say this, and I said this on a San Diego-based radio station this morning, how the Cardinals end the 2024 season, I think, will dictate a lot of change. Now, if they go in there and they sneak into the wild card, because it's, we've seen them do September insanity before, it's kind of the team's MO, then I think you're seeing a fan base that is maybe not pleased with how the season went, but certainly excited that the Cardinals were able to figure it out in the last month. But if the Cardinals go out and flame out in September and they are facing the possibility of back-to-back losing seasons, then I think that 2021 decision to part ways from Mike Shildt, whether it was the organization felt it was justified or not, you can put a lot more scrutiny on that. Right now, though, I think it's just too early to tell. I will say this, no surprise here. It will be a very emotional 4 days for Mike Shildt, and he's done a great job with that San Diego squad. You think about the guys that they've been missing. There will be no Tatis this series. They haven't had Yu Darvish. Joe Musgrove gone for most of the year, though he's back. He'll pitch on Wednesday, I believe. No Ha-Seong Kim. I mean, you go down the list, and what we're seeing in San Diego is what we saw in St. Louis, Mike Shildt being a total player's manager and getting the best from his team. No matter how you look at it, it's an imperative series for both sides. The Cardinals have to find a way to win this series and keep their momentum going strong, because the last thing you want to do is get steamrolled by San Diego in your last homestand in August.
What's your prediction for this one, Katie? How do you think this goes?
Oh, that's tough. It's really tough because I looked at the Padres pitching staff, and they get
Turns out they're good.
Joe Musgrove,
They're good.
Michael King. That's tough. I think a split is good if we're looking at not an impending standings and calendar-wise, but I don't think you can settle for splits at this point of the season.
The Cardinals, when they get out of this stretch of games, Katie, they have their next 13 against San Diego, New York, Milwaukee, and Seattle. That's the next 13 games. If I told you right now, you go up to Oli Marmol and guarantee him he can go 7-6 in this 13-game stretch, do you think he takes it, if he's being honest?
I don't think that's enough. I mean, it's better than the alternative, which is anything with a losing record, right? But I don't think that's enough. And I mean, granted, these are very formidable opponents, but it's a product of their own doing, right? They have to win more than that.
What is enough, Katie?
Even though it's one game, I think 8-5 you take it. 9 out of 13 you definitely take that. But 7-6 just feels so similar to 500, and I don't think this team can continue playing 500 baseball in September if they want to make a significant run.
Hey, Katie, we appreciate the time as always. Certainly looking forward to your great work that we're going to see over at The Athletic after this series against the Padres. Cardinals versus Padres over the next 4 days, right out there at Busch Stadium. Katie will be covering it all for The Athletic and on Twitter at Katie J. Wu. We appreciate the time as always. We'll talk with you again next week, Katie.
You got it, guys. Talk soon.
Absolutely. That's Katie Wu joining us as she does each and every Monday here on BK and Ferrario. 8-5, I think, would probably be what you need in this stretch. Like anything less than that, and you walk away saying, man, they probably did what they needed to do if they took care of business previously against the lesser opponents on their schedule. But when you get swept by the Cincinnati Reds, when you lose 3 out of 4 against the Cubs, and you lose 2 out of 3 against the Pirates, your margin for error now is so thin that you lose the ability to just go like 500 against these quality opponents on your schedule. Now you got to go out there and be better than all of the best teams that remain on your schedule. It's not an easy task, and it's why right now it's hard for me to feign some kind of optimism about the team. I don't believe in them. I don't believe that this team has an 8-5 stretch against this caliber of opponents. I hope they prove me wrong. And if they do, they'll find themselves going into the final stretch of the season in mid-September, Cincinnati, Toronto, Pittsburgh, Cleveland, Colorado, and San Francisco with a real chance to go on a run. I have a really hard time believing that that's going to be the case.
Yeah, I mean, if you're talking about picking up 8 of this next 13, I mean, you're talking about not only winning all of those series, but you're talking about potentially pulling out a sweep in one of these. And does anybody believe that this team has the ability to pull off a sweep against San Diego, New York, or Milwaukee? No. Because, I mean, to pull off
Milwaukee, maybe. Seattle, maybe.
Maybe, but, I mean, if you're pulling off a sweep against Milwaukee, I mean, we're talking about the ultimate combustion from the Milwaukee Brewers more than the Cardinals go out there and dominate. Like, no area of this team convinces me that, yeah, they could pull off a sweep. I mean, when was the last sweep that this team pulled off? Baltimore?
Yeah, I think
Probably.
so.
I mean,
that's a good team.
That's a good team, but, I mean, I think Baltimore was just having an off week.
Three-game sweep. Oof.
I think it was
San Francisco, late June.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. And that was a weird one.
And that was another weird one.
At Rickwood Field.
Now, I know BK loves
that's true.
I love that BK believes that, hey, anything can happen in baseball. He's very poetic.
Before that, it was Baltimore. And in late May.
But with the pitching that you're going to go up against with San Diego, with the offense you're going to go up against with New York, I just don't buy it. I don't buy it.
Man, are those the only sweeps that they've had this season?
That sounds right.
Oof.
And now count how many times the Cardinals have been swept.
I actually don't think it's
It's not as many as you'd think because they generally are like a 500 club where they win 1, lose 2, win 2, lose 1. Like that. Yeah. That's just the way that this team has operated. If you're going by 3+ game sweeps, it hasn't happened either way very often this season. Unfortunately, it did happen for them in Cincinnati.
I like your
optimism. And that was that's why that series felt the way that it did. Because it was such a letdown against a bad team on your schedule. And I understand Cincinnati's talented, but look, the record matters. And you went into that series, you were in the playoff push, you left that series, and you felt like you were out of it. And there's a reason for that.
Yeah. Let's be honest, they weren't competitive in Cincinnati. It's one thing to be swept. It's another to be swept and not even competitive. Like, they were never in any of those games.
Yeah. I put together, so we're not doing the lineup game. It's not out yet. But as we were talking to Katie, I was thinking to myself, like, okay, what would it look like if they just decided, hey, let's put on a regular basis Ivan Herrera into our lineup as a DH, and let's put Goldie on the bench for the foreseeable future.
Who will be the backup catcher then?
Exactly. That's why they won't do it. So this is what I kind of came up with. I'm curious if you guys think that this is something that would make sense. This is against right-handed pitching, which is what they're going to see in every game in this series, or at least that's projected. Wynn batting leadoff, as always. Burleson in left field batting second. Carpenter at first base. Arenado at third. Donovan at second. Herrera's your DH. Nootbaar in right. Pages at catcher. And Scott in center field. I think that's probably your best lineup against right-handed pitching. It leaves a lot to be desired defensively because now you've got Burleson in left and Carpenter at first, both of which are probably below average for their respective positions. Outside of that, you feel pretty good about where you're at defensively at every other spot. Is that what you guys would do, or would you just say, you know what, like, I'm going to have one of Pham or Goldie in my lineup to help me defensively at one of those two spots? Because that means you can't have one of those two lefty bats in the lineup, or it means taking out Ivan Herrera.
I would probably go with Pham and left, and then I would have Burley at first. And then
Carpenter is your DH over Herrera?
Yeah. And either,
so now we're not seeing Herrera, which is what we just said a couple of segments ago we want to see more
but
of.
What I was going to say is, and it's what they won't do, but that's why they should start Herrera.
Yeah, I was going to say,
sure, because they need offense. Mm-hmm. You know, I'd much rather go Carpet DH, Burley at first, who looks like a solid first baseman, and Tommy Pham in left because he provides a little bit better defense than Burley, I think. And, like, even though his numbers don't show, he's giving you competitive at-bats every time he's out there.
And he's a threat at the plate. Like, yeah. I mean, there's a threat with Tommy Pham at the plate over Pedro Pages at the plate.
Yeah, I think that's the better route to go. And how much defense are you actually sacrificing behind the plate? The Cardinals will tell you a ton. I'm not necessarily sure that's the case, but that's the route that I would go.
If we're going to be honest about this, if you want to see Ivan Herrera, stop with this. You need him as a DH. Play him at the catcher position. Figure out who he is and stop acting like the plays behind the plate and the approach of throwing guys out at second base is causing this team to lose.
I mean, basically, what we're saying is you have to decide one of those spots to be deficient at defensively. Either it's catcher, first base, or left field. Or potentially two of the three.
Yeah. And which one's going to cause you more pain? Because honestly, first base and left field are going to cause you more pain than a catcher.
I think they would tell you the opposite. They would tell you the biggest pain comes from behind the plate, and that's why I don't think they're going to put Ivan Herrera behind the plate. Is because they fear that the drop-off defensively from Pages to Herrera is just too significant. I think what they're probably going to end up doing is they'll play Goldie at first base. They'll put Burleson at DH, and they will go with Pham in left field.
Oh, see, I think they'll keep Carpenter in the lineup.
Excuse me. Burleson, yeah.
I think they keep Carp in the lineup.
Yeah.
So
I think Burleson's your outfielder.
Burleson in left, and then Goldie at first, and then you have Pham coming off of the bench.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's what I think they'll do.
So your bench in that scenario is Pham, Herrera, Baker, and Fermin.
Yeah. That sounds like what they would do.
And they do have 3 left-handed pitchers coming out of their bullpen, so you could utilize those guys late, and then they become platoon options for you.
We couldn't use Herrera, though. We got to have a backup catcher, you know?
Yeah. What are you going to do? You can't.
I do think they keep Pham on the bench because of that platoon potential.
You're not going to lose the DH.
Because now you could use Baker or Herrera at DH as the platoon option for Carpenter.
Yeah.
And then you can use Pham coming off of the bench for Burleson or Nootbaar if you've got a lefty coming in for those guys.
Yeah. I mean,
That's
I like
probably
that they can mix and match a little bit better, which, again, plays to what I said earlier. It's more of a Ollie Marmol roster to where he can do that and feel like he's got something to play late in an inning. I really wish yesterday that who's the manager of the Twins again? Why am I drawing a blank on his name? Rocky Deli or whatever his name is. Yeah, I wish he was smart and walked Nootbaar because we would have seen what Marmol would have done because he would have had the bases loaded with 2 outs, 1 or 2 outs, and Pa has a spot coming up. What does Marmol do then? Because If he lets Pa his bat, it tells me a lot about where he thinks kind of how important that spot is. But they had better options, in my opinion, to give you a better competitive at-bat in Herrera and Luke and Baker potentially. And I wish we would have seen it yesterday to see how he would react to it.
He would have gone to Goldie.
Oh, against that? He's so outmatched.
Agreed.
Oh,
That's retribution for Goldie for getting
They're
walked
sure as hell
before.
not going to Herrera in that spot.
oh my.
Yeah, they're not going to
If you
Herrera.
think they're going to...
Yeah.
If you think they're going to Baker...
Well, I don't mind if you don't go to Baker.
Over
just so we're
Goldie?
clear.
They're not going to Herrera
I would
there.
have gone Herrera over Goldie. Man, that's such bad managing.
Coming up in
I know it
15
didn't happen,
minutes.
but it would have been.
Which Blues player is most likely to finish the season as an award winner? Alex will tell you the answer to that coming up in just a little bit. Coming up next, Bernie Miklasz had some interesting comments about the Cardinals and their lack of infrastructure in the minor leagues. You're going to want to hear this. That's next here on 101 ESPN. With Alex and T-Bone, I'm BK. So over the weekend, we were listening to a podcast, Best Podcast in Baseball with Derek Gould. He did a fantastic job with it. On this one, he had Bernie Miklasz, formerly, of course, here with 101 ESPN, one of our dear friends. And I thought Bernie had an excellent point during this podcast that I wanted to share with you guys. Again, this is courtesy of the Best Podcast in Baseball. You can find it over in the St. Louis Post-Dispatch website. You can also find it wherever you get your podcasts. Here's Bernie, and this conversation was started because they were talking about the Cardinals' big issues and what's lacking right now at the major league level. And Bernie made the point of, I think it starts far deeper than anything you're seeing right now at the major league level. Give this a listen.
Making some calls around Major League Baseball, some of the front office types that I know and who I trust to give me a straight opinion on this. In the industry, when you guys look at the Cardinals, like what do you see? Like what is, and the one thing that came up with the 2 or 3 guys that I talked to, they just said, look, their infrastructure is really lacking. They have good instructors in their system. They don't have enough of them. They do not have enough staffing in the minor league level. One gentleman said, I kind of feel sorry for the major league staff only because the guys that they're getting coming up through the system have not had the luxury of having so many tools that most organizations give their young hitters. And so when they run into a real big problem, all of a sudden it's kind of, what do we do? What do we do? Their infrastructure is real, especially for an organization of the Cardinals' stature, the franchise. I mean, it's really ridiculous if you think about it. The glaring need to draft and develop pitching and young hitters who reach their potential at the major leagues and they stay there. How can you be understaffed? How can you not have the most up-to-date technology available for your guys? So I think the real issue starts beneath the surface in the minor leagues.
That was Bernie on the Best Podcast in Baseball, and it's something that has been kind of rumored for quite some time. I'm glad Bernie finally put this thing on the record, because if you talk to people within the Cardinals organization, if you get them honest and off the record, some of them will tell you, listen, one of the things that we need to fix is we have far too few instructors down in the minor leagues. This is actually something that Mike Shildt was really big on. And his point was more, we're losing our history. We're losing the ability to go back to former players. And it kind of started there. This started during the pandemic for the most part, and it's continued. And they just never replaced a lot of the players that they used to have available to their minor leaguers. Now, they're starting to do some more, but I can pinpoint the number of guys that they've got it with. It's like Ryan Ludwig and Izzy, and that's kind of it. And they are currently roving instructors. Izzy helps with the pitching, Luddy helps with the position players, and that's kind of the way they operate, and that's pretty much it. Guys, they're getting lapped by some of the teams across Major League Baseball. And this is one of those things in spending that you can't get a firm number on because it's not available publicly. Like, you look at the payroll, that's easy to see, right? We can see where the Cardinals are at relative to their peers and what they're spending on players at the major league level. That's one thing you can spend on. It is not the only thing, though. You look at, like, your spring training facility, for example. How many years have they been talking about the renovations that are coming? They're coming. They're coming. Well, eventually, they've got to get done. And I understand some of this is about the city and some of the permits and all these different things. Cool. Can you get it done? How many times have we been talking about for years now? And they do have this to a degree. It's more of a non-traditional format, but they've got it now, I suppose. A pitching lab, right? We talked about that for like 5 years, where they're like, we got to get this pitching lab. We got to get this pitching lab. Okay, are you going to build one eventually? The technology on the hitting side of things, it took years after other teams had this in place and they knew exactly what they were using and how to use it for Jeff Albert to implement that at the major league level. And then even longer to get it all implemented in the minor leagues for this system. Alex, it goes beyond any of that, though. Now it's about literally the number of coaches that are available. This offseason at the major league level, they said we had guys that were stretched too thin. Our pitching coach had like 5 different jobs that he was trying to handle on his own. And we had to hire new people to be able to fill the gap there because we were getting passed by from other organizations that were able to do a better job of pre-scouting these other teams or do a better job of helping our players. Sonny Gray literally had a conversation that he spoke about publicly with John Mozeliak where he said, do you guys have X, Y, and Z? And Mo was like, and I give him a little bit of credit for this, I suppose. At least he admitted where he was wrong. He said, no, tell me more about that. Good, you should learn more about that. How did you not have it to begin with? How is Sonny Gray coming from the Minnesota Twins, not exactly the New York Yankees or the LA Dodgers when it comes to spending, And he had stuff there that is not available right now or previously for the St. Louis Cardinals. That's crazy talk to me. So Bernie's point there, Alex, I think is a really important one. And it's something we're never going to see on a payroll or on some of the spending that is across Major League Baseball. The Cardinals have fallen behind in a major way with what they are spending resource-wise down in the minor league system. And we're seeing it. We're seeing it pay off in a poor way, a negative way at the big league level right now.
And this might be too extreme of a response, but if that truly is the case, and I'm not going to doubt Bernie, who does have ties all around Major League Baseball, that's embarrassing for the Cardinals. Because, I mean, you were one of the most historic franchises in all of Major League Baseball. You have had history after history amount of players that have played for the St. Louis Cardinals. And on top of it, the last two managers that you have had made their way up through the minor leagues for your team all the way to the major leagues. And you haven't found a way to establish and put in place a good staff from A-ball all the way up to AAA so that these major league players are, so that these young players are ready when they get to the major leagues. And I mean, it's not just Major League Baseball. Look at the NL Central. The NL Central has passed you by. The Milwaukee Brewers have found a way to stay consistently good with a lot of players that come up through the system and you're like, wait, who's this? And they've got guys that can come through in big moments and the Cardinals, meanwhile, are still churning out, wondering where these guys are from. And the reason why I say it's embarrassing is there are so many former players that talk about how the St. Louis Cardinals was a perfect point of their career. Like when I used to do those pre and post, we'd have alumni all the time come through Ballpark Village. And every single interview would be, man, this was the best time of my career, playing in St. Louis, around these fans. And you as an organization can't find a way to capitalize on those types of players that had major league careers, established major league careers, and you can't find a way to implement them into your minor league system so that these young players that get drafted are like, hey, this is how it takes. Hey, this is what it takes to get to the major league level. And now you've got guys that get from A-ball to AAA that are like, what are we supposed to do here? They get to the majors and they get sent back down. That is a embarrassing problem to have if you're the Cardinals.
Yeah, and it's an ownership problem. Like, let's be very clear about what this is. It's an ownership problem and it's a leadership problem from at the top level from the organization, which means it's a Mo problem. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is because I think a lot of people will point to Ollie. Like, Ollie's the problem. Ollie's the problem. And maybe there are some issues there. It's possible. I'm not willing to just completely write that off. But my point on this is Ollie brought it up at the end of the season and said, we need more help. We need more coaches to be around. These other teams, like you look at the Dodgers, if a player needs help and there's a lot of different players that have different sensibilities, right? They learn in different ways, just like kids do in school. Some kids learn better from visuals. Some people learn better from auditory, right? They listen. Some people learn better by writing something down, and that's how they internalize things. When I got to college, I had to figure out, how do I study? Because in high school, this is not like a humble brag or anything. I didn't study. I didn't know how.
Yep,
so I got to college, and I take these exams, and like the first one was a massive wake-up call where I was like, whoa, okay, I need to figure out what works for me. For some people, it's flashcards, right? The reason I bring this up is because everybody learns a little bit differently. And however you learn, the organization needs to have somebody available to help you learn that way. So for some people, it's very analytically driven. For other people, if they hear that analytical dribble, they're like, just put that somewhere else. I don't need to hear any of that stuff. I'm about feel. I'm a feel hitter. And so you need to have somebody available for them. And if you don't have that guy available, guess what? They're going to outsource it. They're going to go to somebody else. And that guy that they're outsourcing it to, the Cardinals get frustrated by this sometimes because that outsourcing, they don't have to live with some of the downside of it. If they break a hitter, so to speak, well, cool. I've got 500 other guys that I work with, and I bet you one of them is going to end up putting up bonkers numbers. And that's where the big advertising comes from, which brings more people into us, and that's how we make our money. For the Cardinals, we got to win, dude. If you break one of our top prospects, that is a huge deal for us. So if you're the ownership group and you see this stuff that is happening internally, at some point you got to wake up and say, we have to fix this. We have to find what we need to do to keep up with the times, because they very clearly have not done that. There would have been a point in time 15, 20 years ago, hell, maybe even 10 years ago, where their current staffing was enough. It's no longer the case, man. There's more information available than ever before. And I thought Bernie's point on guys get to the big league level, they have struggles and they don't know how to respond, is a really important one, because now you have information available. You should have resources available that can help you get back on track at this level or at the lower levels. But the reality, according to his reporting, and we've heard this elsewhere as well, some of those guys might not be prepared for that. Some of these guys might hear some of the information that they're being given, and it sounds like a foreign language to them because they didn't have it available to them down in the minor leagues. And that is a problem. That's part of the issue. So eventually they've got to get that figured out, and that should be priority number one this offseason, because T-Bone, you made a great point earlier today. If they are wrong, if they end up missing on Walker and on Gorman and possibly on Herrera as well, dude, they don't have a next wave of position players. And we know the pitching is lacking in the system as well. So if you end up missing on this wave of position players, man, that youth movement that we're talking about becomes a tank really quick if you're not careful. So they've got to get this fixed before it's too late with this core group of players. They have to be right about these guys, or they are in a bad place, not just for this year and next, but potentially for the next 5 years. I do believe there's time. I think they can correct this, but it requires everybody in that front office and everybody at the ownership level looking in the mirror and saying what we are doing is not enough. We have to improve, and this offseason is the time to do it. The Royals did it last year. We talked to my buddy that covers the Royals, where he said, hey, last offseason, they changed everything about their approach. And now look where it's gotten them. They got to a place where they're not spending crazy money. They did luck into a potential superstar in Bobby Witt Jr., but the rest of it, like, they built a core group of players that is now fighting for a potential number one seed in the American League. It happens fast if you get it right. It's up to the Cardinals to make it right this offseason. With Alex and T-Bone, I'm BK. Coming up next, which Blues player is most likely to finish this season with an award? Alex will tell you his answer to that next here on 101 ESPN.
Tanner Hendricks here at Thursday Sports Center update driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. Cardinals back in action tonight as they start a 4-game set with the San Diego Padres. 6:45 will be first pitch, and Kyle Gibson will be on the mound for St. Louis. This portion update is driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. See them at londoff.com. Chevy, together we drive. Are you kidding me?
With Alex and T-Bone on BK, so which Blues player is most likely to finish this year with an award? Alex, over on The Athletic, they put together their list of the dark horse candidates to win each award. I went through the Hart Trophy, the Calder, Norris, Vezina.
You really looked at the Hart Trophy? You really looked at that, huh? And you were like, oh, maybe the Blues will be on here.
Art Ross, Jack Adams, and the Selke. And I was thinking, man, maybe one of these, they're going to mention a Blue. Because they brought up like 6 different dudes for each one of those awards. I was like, oh, for sure, at least one of these, they're going to mention a singular St. Louis Blue. The answer was no. They did not bring up a single one of them on this entire list.
Dom was a collaboration on the piece.
He wasn't alone. It was 3 different dudes, and none of them brought up a Blue.
Yeah, but I think Dom is the guy that's antagonizing everybody. Like, don't pick a Blue! Don't pick a Blue!
Alex, for the awards that I just mentioned, that includes MVP, Rookie of the Year, Best Defenseman, Best Goalie, Leading Goal Scorer in the NHL, Most Points in the NHL, Coach, and Best Defensive Forward. Who is the Blue, in your opinion, that is most likely to finish the season winning one of those respective awards?
I mean, I would say there's 4 guys in these categories, but if you're going down the most likely path, to me, it's Binnington as the Vezina. I think second to that, like 1A, 1B, would be Robert Thomas as the Selke Trophy winner. But I think for Thomas to get to that point, you're going to have to unseat a guy like Barkov, who now is the fan favorite every single year to get picked in the Selke. Vezina, I know people don't like Jordan Binnington, but the numbers back it up. He should have been in the top 3 last year.
Agreed.
Your defense is improved, at least on paper, for this coming season. And if Binnington can remain the same level of impressive play that he had last year, you're talking about a guy who, once again, will be in the top 3, top 5 of goals saved above average, high danger percentage saves. And if you're talking about those stats and if the wins back it up, I don't know how you deny Jordan Binnington there. I think I could see a situation where Bannister could be in the conversation for the best coach. I think if Dvorsky makes this roster, he could be in the Rookie of the Year. I don't think this rookie class is as impressive as years past. I know everybody's all hyped up for Macklin Celebrini with San Jose. Guys, San Jose still sucks.
Mishkov is the favorite right now in fan.
Also makes a lot of sense, but wait till he gets a hold of John Tortorella just bitching him out nonstop in games. So I think when it comes down to it, if you were to put me in a corner and say best odds of winning, I would put Jordan Binnington as the best goaltender with Robert Thomas right behind him.
Yeah, I would definitely go Benner as my number 1 for the chance to win the Vezina, because I agree with you. I thought it was a joke he was in top 3 last year in the Vezina voting. And you got to improve defense. If you see him kind of bounce back again this year, and if the Blues make the playoffs, I think that was another difference maker in kind of the voting last year. They make the playoffs, everybody's going to look at it and go, okay, well, how did they do it? And my guess is they're not going to look at it and go, that say there was an MVP or this like depth of scoring that was unbelievable. They're going to look at it and go, oh, Jordan Binnington, he's got the numbers to back it up. He gets in that conversation. I think if I had the second closest one, it's interesting you mentioned Thomas for Selke, because I thought about it, but I actually have that at third because we saw last year he got the toughest matchups in the NHL. I think that's what some of the numbers came out and said. Like
he also should be at least towards the top 3, if not the top 5.
The problem is like I don't know what his line mates are going to look like, and if he's on a line with Kyrou, it's going to drag down some of that defensive value. So his plus minus will take a little bit of a dip because of that. I think second for me is Bannister winning Coach of the Year, because I think if this team makes the playoffs, he automatically throw his hand in there.
Just ruined mine.
To be fair, I didn't talk last segment, so I'm just going to pull it out there, Bannister as coach.
Hey, if it makes you feel better, buddy, I barely talked
all
too.
I'm going to say was he referenced my great point in the office today.
Well, that was you being a part of the segment.
Yeah.
Damn, man.
That's on me.
Hey, I wasn't going to say it if he didn't throw shade at me, okay?
He just threw in that side slam in the middle of his breakdown.
That's one of the best moments we've ever had on the show. It was necessary.
I still love you, buddy.
What, your segment that you talked the whole time?
No, T-Bone telling me that I talked the whole time in the last segment. He's right. There was nothing inaccurate about what he just said.
It was an 11-minute segment, and I think I talked 3.
Well, Bernie talks for 2.
That's true, too. And a 4th guest.
To be fair, that one was worth it.
What about the other 9?
There's the 2-minute span in that segment that was really good, I thought.
Bernie was great.
Other than Bernie and me.
T-Bone made a good point. The Jack Adams Award, Drew Bannister, who's 45-1 right now to win that award. The only coaches with longer odds, Alex, are Rick Tocchet and Jim Montgomery, and the only reason that they're longer is because they are the most recent Jack Adams Award winners. Like, they won the last 2 of them. So it's...
Well, the problem with the Jack Adams and why, to me, it was third over Robert Thomas is, like, you don't win the Jack Adams as the coach in the NHL unless you're a top team in the division.
I know.
Like, that's the hard part. And this team is going to be a wild card team.
This year it's going to be Craig Berube.
I know a lot of people are like, Berube's going to be really good in Toronto. I'm still a little concerned about that.
Interesting.
I think their roster.
Sheldon Keefe's the
favorite
I think their roster is bad. Who?
Sheldon Keefe. He's the favorite to win coach of the
Oh,
year.
God, I hope that happens so much.
Where do you go again? New Jersey?
Yeah.
Not that I don't like Bannister. I'm excited. But I just remember when everybody was just ishing on me with Sheldon Keefe about, he's not that good of a coach. He's a problem. I hope he goes
3
and
of the
does
top 5 guys in the Jack Adams Award winner watch are new coaches to their respective teams. It's Sheldon Keefe with New Jersey, Travis Green with Ottawa, and Craig Berube with the Toronto.
If I can be honest with you,
Green.
I think the guy that wins it is Andrew Brunettigan in Nashville.
He's third. He's at 9.
He would be the one I would pick because you're going to be
Chris
talking.
Knobloch with the Oilers. They have
That
like
would be
5
it,
guys
too.
on their
Yeah.
roster, so I don't know. That feels tough.
That would be it too. But I mean, it's going to be Nashville if you're going coach of the year because that team to me is the best team in the Central Division.
This is the thing I hate about the coach of the year thing. And I feel like we've talked about this in baseball before. Well, yeah, he should win. Like, if he doesn't meet expectations called winning, then he's probably
I'm with you.
fired.
I'm
Like,
with you.
That's where, like, for Bannister, it's interesting. Is like, we all agree. Like, right now, we probably don't think they're a playoff team. Or if, like, best case, you think they're, like, the last wild card. So, like, if they make the playoffs at all, like, it should be like, hey, that guy
It's
exceeded
the same
expectations.
argument for the Norris Trophy. The defenseman should be the one that wins the thing, but it's a guy who scores 100 points that gets it.
If the Blues have the same season this year that the Nashville Predators had last year, which was 99 points, ended up as a wild card, does that get
If the
Bannister into
Blues
conversation?
finish with where the Predators were
Last year.
in my opinion, yeah. Because
But realistically, probably not. Right?
Realistically,
'Cause then you're going to have one of those coaches that we just talked about, like New Jersey, instead of being what they were last year, where you're towards the bottom of your division. This year, the talent plays up to its level, and they finished second in the Metro with 110 points, and he ends up winning the Jack Adams. Right?
Yeah.
That's
typically
the hard part, and I don't see that kind of a ceiling for this team.
No, typically it's going to be a team that, like, I could see Utah's head coach will probably be in the conversation, Nashville's team, and then you're going to get the President's Trophy team. How it should be is it should be guys who exceeded expectations for their roster, but they never go about it that way because they always go about it as, oh, well, this guy had a team that put up 100-something. Like Jim Montgomery's probably going to be in this again because Boston will be one of the top teams. Florida's guy will be
The
up there.
difference, though, is they have expectations. It's typically the team that most outperforms their expectations. That is great.
Yeah.
And so that's where you get into, like, New Jersey is a second-tier contender right now in the NHL. They fired their coach. They bring in a new guy. Oh, well, here's the one that got them to play up to their... Well, no, the talent was, A, healthy, and B, played up to its level this year. Is that all because they hired Alex's favorite coach in the NHL and Sheldon Keefe? I don't think so, but he's going to get a lot of the credit because we don't know where else to blame it or where else to place it.
Yeah, and that's what it always comes down to. It comes down to the coach that gets the best. That's why when Craig Berube was in the conversation that year they won the Cup of being the Jack Adams. I don't believe he won it that year. It was Boston's coach that won it that year. But it's always the guy that will come in and say, well, this team was bad last year and the coach was the secret sauce. And in all reality, what it was the players woke up and actually started playing, but the coach gets all the glory with it.
It's good to hear from you guys in this segment. Coming
Especially
up next,
you,
the Jump
T-Bone.
Drawer here on
Thanks,
101
man.
ESPN. Hey, it's BK, and if you guys want to get involved in a competition this year during the football season that could potentially have you with $6 million or $10 million in guaranteed prizes, the place to do so is Circa Sports. They had their celebration over the weekend with a bunch of different radio stations coming to town in Las Vegas to celebrate Circa Millions and Circa Survivors. The biggest ever pool for their Circa Survivor, $10 million guaranteed to the winners. Alex, if you pick one team straight up every single week and you get to the end of the season and you're the last man standing, you're getting millions in winners. If you don't, if you want to go the millions route instead, you pick 5 teams against the spread each and every week. The winner is going to take home $1 million at the end of the year. It's Circa Sports. They're the best doing it right now.
This always makes football season so much more fun, and it's why you need to be a part of this and just the Circa Sports betting app, Circa Sports Illinois. Plus, you hear me talk about their customer service. You're speaking with an actual person if you have problems rather than a robot. Check it out today. Download it today. If you or someone you know may have a problem with gambling, call 1-800-GAMBLER or text ILGAMB to 833-234.
All right, boys, I don't know if you have any embarrassing stories about how you've been injured in your lives, but ESPN's Field Yates just had a pretty darn good one. I don't know if you saw this story over the weekend.
Missed it.
But Field Yates was in the Bahamas for his ultimate draft weekend with ESPN. And they were trying to figure out, yeah, right? They were trying to figure out, okay, a way to find out. I don't know exactly why they decided to do it this way, but they're trying to decide their draft order. And he was on the beach with some of the guys, and they were doing a tackle dummy, right, on the beach. And so there's this video that's available right now. If you go to Schefter's Twitter account,
is this for draft positioning, the tackle dummy?
Yeah.
So they were doing the draft. They were doing the tackling dummy. So he goes through. Field was a football player in college, and he goes full force into this thing. It looks like a great form tackle. He's ready to go. Unfortunately, at the end of it, you see him kind of tumble over, and then he's like, hands on his knees, kind of working out his shoulder a little bit. You could see him frustrated, and then a guy comes over. He's like, man, great job, great job. He's like, that hurt. Oh, that hurt my shoulder. And there's an update from ESPN's Adam Schefter.
I just watched this. What an idiot.
While engaging in an activity to determine the draft order in his fantasy football league, Yates dislocated his shoulder. The injury resulted in a brief hospitalization.
In the Bahamas?
But Yates has now been discharged and is aiming to be ready for opening day.
Yeah,
Getting that all according to Adam Schefter.
He barely hit the dummy.
Yeah.
He got the top of the dummy, and then shoulder went right into the sand.
Yeah. So the reason I bring this up is because I'm curious. This is obviously an unbelievably embarrassing story.
Yeah.
The dude was down in the Bahamas celebrating ESPN's fantasy football launch for this year. And as he was tackling a dummy on the beach, he separates his shoulder.
Nice. Yeah. You can't trump that one.
Do you guys have anything of an embarrassing injury that took place for you? I've got one if you guys don't.
Well, T-Bone never talks, so go ahead, T-Bone.
I regret saying that. Well, I had hernia surgery, and it wasn't from like being a man and lifting weights. It was from coughing too hard. So then I ended up having to have a hernia surgery because of that.
You coughed too hard?
Yeah, I coughed so hard that I felt a pain, and then like 2 days later, I'm in the hospital having surgery. Well, to be fair, I was still getting over something at the time.
And you were coughing for him, or you just coughed?
No, I was just coughing.
Cough, Tanner.
Yeah, we get it, man.
Coughed too
We got
hard.
it. We got it.
Yeah, but that's how I ended up with a hernia. Not lifting weights, but by coughing.
So Stalter has a good one. He's told his on the fast lane before. Alex, do you have any?
I mean, you guys know the most recent one. I dropped a freaking black box and broke my toe. I'm not really
Also
sure.
broke your foot while you were on a
golf course. Yeah, but that one, there was reasoning behind it. I was inebriated and missed one step, and I didn't break it. I rolled that ankle, and it was rough.
So in high school, one night, middle of the night, I'm sleeping, and I have this Charlie horse in the back of my leg. While I'm sleeping, I wake up, and I'm like, I don't know if you guys have ever woken up from a cramp
like
in the middle of the night.
Out of water.
I get up, I'm like, I tore my calf in that cramp that took place in the middle of the night. I don't know how it happened, why it happened. To this day, I have issues with it.
Oh my God.
It like became a knee issue where I now have a Baker's cyst. For anybody that deals with knee issues, you've probably seen it.
That sounds made up.
It's fluid that like pushes back to the back of your knee. Eventually, it became something that was an overcompensation for my knee. I tore my meniscus as a result of it.
Ooh.
It was all bad.
My dad, we were playing kickball in like a league, and we were like having a practice before our league started, and my dad, he's like, yeah, I'll play. And so he was rounding third, and somebody tried to throw him out, and he tried to dodge the ball, and as he landed, he tore his meniscus. And I'm like, he like landed on it and tore it completely, and he was like, probably shouldn't play this. And he kept playing. He played on a broken meniscus or a torn meniscus. He's like, yeah, I'll just go through.
Boy, BK's story makes me need to drink more water because I think 3 times in the last month I've gotten cramps in my calf in the middle of the night.
You got a sports hernia from coughing.
I know, but this is definitely a reminder to drink more water.
This is brutal.
So I get those cramps in my calf, and they feel like it's
I'd
being
be more
torn
worried you
apart.
coughing on your couch.
Yesterday, I was
managed.
my wife was out of town this weekend. She went to Kansas City for a bachelorette party. So yesterday, I'm at home with Luca on my own solo dad duty, right? And you know how this is, Alex. Sometimes the kid just wants to be held. So I'm holding him, and we're in the bathroom. I'm grabbing a couple of things. He dropped something on the floor because he's one, and that's just the way that it goes. So I bend over with him and pick up whatever it was. At this point, I don't even remember. Unfortunately, I'd forgotten that we have like a medicine cabinet where it's the mirror that opens up. I forgot that it was open at the time. So I sit back up, I stand back up, and I pick my head up, and bam! Right on the top of my head, I'll show you guys during the break. There is a massive gash in the top of my head right now.
I thought you were going to say you bumped Luca's head. That's where I thought this was going.
Luke is fine. I unfortunately maybe need stitches, but we're not going to get that taken care of.
Nah, you're fine.
Too embarrassing. So yeah,
you're fine.
Life is good. With Alex and T-Bone on BK in 15 minutes, we'll play a game of in or out. If you guys have any scenarios, we'll tell you if we are in or out on them coming up in about 15 minutes or so. But coming up next, let's get back to the Mike Shildt conversation. He might have been right about some of the issues with this organization. It's not his job. It's not my job, but it is somebody's job to get this thing fixed. We'll talk about that next year on 101 ESPN. Hey, it's BK. I got to tell you about my friends over at Victory Men's Health. They have unlocked my inner champion, and they can do the exact same thing for you. When I went in, I told them, they asked me, they said, what is it that you'd like to feel better about, right? What's bothering you right now? I said, it's nothing significant for me. It's just I feel tired. I feel groggy. I feel like I'm not getting the most out of every single day. And they said, well, let's see what we can do for you. They took a micronutrient lab for me, and they found out, hey, some of my levels were a little bit low. That included some of my vitamins. I have a deficiency there. And so they gave me the right supplements, and now I wake up every single day. I feel more rested, and during the day, I don't feel as groggy. I don't have that. It gets like 2, 3 o'clock in the afternoon. You're like, man, do I get another coffee? What do I do? I don't have that feeling anymore. Victory Men's Health was able to do that for me. That was the way they unlocked my inner champion. They can do the same for you. Maybe it's weight loss goals that you haven't been able to meet on your own. They can help you out with that. Low testosterone, erectile dysfunction. Check them out today. They have 4 great locations across the St. Louis area, and online you can see them at victorymenshealth.com.
How the Cardinals end the 2024 season, I think, will dictate a lot of change. Now, if they go in there and they sneak into the wild card, because it's, we've seen them do September insanity before, it's kind of this team's MO, then I think you're seeing a fan base that is maybe not pleased with how the season went, but certainly excited that the Cardinals were able to figure it out in the last month. But if the Cardinals go out and flame out in September and they are facing the possibility of back-to-back losing seasons, then I think that 2021 decision to part ways from Mike Shildt, whether it was the organization felt it was justified or not, you can put a lot more scrutiny on that. Right now, though, I think it's just too early to tell.
That was Katie Wu on the show earlier today talking about how we will remember the Mike Shildt firing. With Alex and T-Bone, I'm BK. Mike Shildt back in town tonight with the San Diego Padres as their manager. Now, these are two teams that are seemingly in very different trajectories right now. The St. Louis Cardinals right now 5 games out of the wild card standings. Meanwhile, the San Diego Padres are currently significantly up on the Braves in the wild card themselves. They are a game and a half back of the Diamondbacks for the top wild card spot in the National League, 3 games up on the Braves. So they're 8 games ahead of the Cardinals as of today. Alex, when I think back to the Mike Shildt firing, what led to it, the philosophical differences, all of the quiet parts that were never really said out loud for either side. There were reports that came out afterwards. I know Bernie had some. We heard some of these from Derek Gould. And it was basically like, hey, there were a few different things that led into this. Some of it was like little stuff, right? So sometimes some people within the organization think, hey, maybe the organization was too siloed. There was the training staff, there was the performance department, there was the analytics, and then there was Mike Shildt, and none of them really felt like they were cohesive. They didn't feel like one team. They felt like it was all separate entities, that their stuff wasn't necessarily utilized in the best way possible. So that's part of it. And part of it was some people thought that Mike Shildt got a little too big for his britches, where he was asking for things and feeling like he maybe had more power than he actually did within the organization. And Mo made it very clear by firing him, he did not have the pull within the organization that he necessarily thought that he did. Now, whether that was the right move, the wrong move, somewhere in between, I'm not really here to rehash that. But ultimately, some of the things that had came out that Mike Shildt was asking for, like, hey, go out and improve us, specifically at the shortstop position, it feels like he was proven correct long term. Some of the things about, hey, we're losing some of our history. We need to have some of these guys within the organization still. Hey, man, we just had a segment about in the 12 o'clock hour about how it's exactly what they're missing right now down in the minor leagues. Alex, how do you look back at that Mike Shildt firing and how the trajectory of the franchise has gone since then?
I mean, I look back on it and say It's tough because, like, it never felt like it was the right match. It always felt like we were still kind of asking for more with the Cardinals team. But it was different in the sense of Mike Shildt felt like he was asking for what the Cardinals fans were asking for, to where now it feels like Cardinals fans are asking for something that the manager's not on the same page with. It really comes down to, you look back on Mike Shildt and say, the team never continued to improve. It always felt like it was a standstill. I personally feel like the problem for the Cardinals started prior to Mike Shildt. It started with Mike Matheny, and then it kind of carried over into Mike Shildt, got worse, and then we've gotten to Oli Marmol. I've seen a couple of people reference that Mike Shildt seemed to get the best out of the younger players, and that was the big mistake. I kind of would disagree with that, because it felt like the younger players were Paul DeYoung, Colton Wong, and like you saw some shades of greatness, but it never really got to the level that you were hoping for. It felt like with Mike Shildt, there was a level to get to next. Like, that was the opportunity to kind of open another competitive window and grow with it. And the Cardinals never pounced on it with Mike Shildt. And then from there, they got stuck in this kind of situation that they've been in now. So you look back on it and say, it kind of was what could have been with Mike Shildt. And now you go back and say, man, you've missed out. I think that's where the frustration with the front office really began, was with Mike Shildt.
Yeah, I think it was a symptom, not the root cause. And that's how I've always viewed this. Is I don't know that the team would be significantly different right now with Mike Shildt as opposed to Oli Marmol. I don't know that they're necessarily like all that different as managers. They go about it a little bit differently, and they certainly speak to media and fans differently. But I don't necessarily think that the manager is the problem here. And I know that some will certainly push back on that, but like, if you flipped their roles, if Mike Shildt was the manager here and Oli Marmol was the manager in San Diego, I think the results might look pretty similar to what they currently do. Honestly, I don't know that either team is all that dissimilar from where they're at right now. I think Oli can win with another organization. And I think Mike Shildt is, in large part, and this is how I feel about most managers, a product of his players. Does Mike Shildt deserve some credit? Yes, for sure. He's put his players in a position to succeed. But I think the bigger problems here are what we talked about earlier today, where it's much bigger than any one individual, whether it's the manager or the hitting coach or whoever. I think the Cardinals have bigger issues, and I think that was the case when Shildt was fired as well.
Yeah, I think, to your point there, I think a lot of the issues you saw in the minor leagues, like, that was all going to kind of come to a crescendo at some point, no matter who the manager was. And 2023 happened to be the first year of that, where the bottom really fell out. But we've talked about it. You saw that kind of coming. If you look at where the Cardinals were with their pitching staff, dating it back to when they had Mike Shildt in 2019. I'd go 19, and I would just kind of build it up from there.
I just pulled up 19.
You can see the crescendo of, like, they're lacking pitching depth. They're lacking developing pitching. Now, they had some prospects in terms of the offensive side that kind of come together to be okay big leaguers, Bader, DeYoung, some of those guys. But if you don't have pitching, I don't care who your manager is. And I think you're right to what you said earlier of Mike Shildt was right about saying, hey, we've kind of lost our way. We got to get back to having more of these, like, former players in advisory roles to kind of be there roaming in the minor leagues, helping these guys. And you know who would have seen that firsthand? Mike Shildt, a guy that made a living by starting in the minor leagues, seeing those guys come in and help those guys. But to your point on, would he be having success here with this roster? No, I don't think he would. And I think Oli does fall a little victim to one thing that Shildt fell victim to, which is trusting the veterans a little too much. Like, Paul Goldschmidt shouldn't be in the lineup right now, but I bet he's going to be in the lineup. We saw them stick with him a little too high in the lineup early on in the year before deciding finally to bump him down. Would Shildt be a guy that's more open to platoons? I don't know. I don't think so. He wasn't very open to him when he was here originally with the St. Louis Cardinals, and that was a big reason that Pujols had success when he was here in 2022. So I think he falls into that muddy middle of managers, which is there's like 5 guys that really make a difference on their team, 5 guys that really hurt their team, and then there's about 20 managers that are just kind of right there, and they're based on what their players are on their roster, and I think that's where Mike Shildt is as a manager.
314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line from the 314. Guys, what are you talking about? Shildt took one of the worst defensive teams in Major League Baseball and turned it into one of the best in a matter of 2 years. The team was much better under him and has regressed in every area ever since he left. First of all, they have not regressed in every single area since he left. That's nonsense. But on the defense point, that was about personnel. This was always my case on Mike Shildt. Was he a good manager in like the fundamental aspects of the game? 100%. I will absolutely buy into that stuff. And has that regressed a bit since he left? You can definitely make the argument that that's the case. Totally fair. I'll concede that argument, in fact. Sure, go ahead and put that one check in favor of Mike Shildt. He's done a good job in that area. But when you look at how they got better defensively, it was by playing guys that were just better defensively. They had young guys that started to emerge in roles that were more important. They also decided to just say, hey, Jose Martinez, you're not a first baseman for us any longer. Instead, we're going to have one of the best defensive first basemen of the generation with Paul Goldschmidt playing at that position. Yeah, that makes a big difference when you don't have a dude that's an error machine at the position any longer. In the outfield, they decided to go from Tommy Pham and Dexter Fowler in the outfield to Harrison Bader and Tyler O'Neill. I think that matters. At third base, they went from Jed Jerko to Tommy Edman playing the position.
Legend.
It's like, yeah, I wonder why they improved defensively. In the infield and the corners, going from Jose Martinez and Jed Jerko to Paul Goldschmidt and Tommy Edman. In the outfield, at center field and in right field, going from Harrison Bader and Tyler O'Neill, getting to that from Tommy Pham and Dexter Fowler. Guys, we don't have to make this more difficult than it was. They got better because they got better players. And that's also why they're struggling right now, because they don't have the dudes anymore. So, like, I think Mike Shildt, once again, to get back to this, Mike Shildt was the symptom. Them firing Shildt spoke to where they were as an organization, and it speaks today to where they are as an organization. Shildt wanted them to improve the roster, and they weren't willing to do it in the way that he wanted to, and he spoke up too much and got out a little bit over his skis, and it resulted in him getting fired. Was it fair? Of course not. Of course it wasn't fair. It wasn't justified then. It isn't justified today. There were other issues there clearly behind the scenes, but those have never come to light and probably never will, and Shildt is now having success in San Diego, so we don't need to rehash some of those arguments. But, man, when I look at what that firing meant for the organization, I don't think that was the turning point. I think the turning point came far before then, when the Cardinals started falling behind, and now what we've seen is just as time passed, whoever the manager was, this was going to be the case for them.
That's why I feel like it started with the Mike Matheny era. It felt like Cardinals were zigging while everyone else was zagging, and it was like, nope, we're going to stick with what's made us successful, and we're going to continue this while everybody else in Major League Baseball kind of changed. And you talk about the front office getting too big for their britches at that point, and it felt like Mike Shildt, Mo, whomever it was, butted heads. I mean, think back to with Matheny. Matheny played a certain amount of guys that he liked. Mo doesn't like it, trades the guys away so that Matheny is forced to play these guys. To me, that was the start of the downfall of, hey, we are going to go about it this way. We are running the organization this way. Either get on board or we'll find somebody who will.
And last thing I'll say on this, to your point on Matheny there, that's kind of the first sign when you start to see, kind of later on in the Matheny era, is the sign of the front office and the manager aren't on the same page. It happened then. It kind of molds into Mike Shildt. And then, for a while, I thought we were seeing it with Ollie and Mo, but it actually sounds like they were on the same page. They were just both wrong at what they were doing with Jordan Walker. So I think that's another big thing is, there's these things that are going on behind the scenes underneath in the minor leagues that they're not getting to. But also, when you start to have the front office butting heads with the manager, well, it's dysfunction. It's continuous dysfunction that is going to lead your organization down a path that's not successful.
Yeah. And when people say no, when people push back, instead of listening and thinking, maybe we are wrong here, maybe there is good points to be had, they say, get out. We don't even want to hear the alternative viewpoint on this. We don't need that perspective inside of this organization. We're the Cardinals. We know what we're doing. What we do here works. Unfortunately, it doesn't work. It's clearly not working right now, and it hasn't worked in quite some time, so maybe Shildt did have some fair points to be had there. Whether you loved him, hated him, somewhere in between on his managing style, forget all of that. As a baseball man, Mike Shildt knows what he's talking about, man. And having differing perspectives inside of a front office is something this team needs more of, not less of. They need outside voices inside of this organization. That's why I thought it was a good thing when they decided to hire Chaim Bloom as a special advisor. Get more of that, not less of it. Unfortunately, when Mike Shildt left, I think they got less of it. Coming up next, In or Out here on 101 ESPN.
It's not your job, Brandon.
Alex Ferrario with you to talk about my friends over at Classic Air Care. A heat advisory today, tomorrow, which means if your HVAC system is not ready to handle this, you are going to be in a predicament. That is why I urge so many people to call Classic Air Care, who have been making people comfortable since 1926. And they've got something called the maintenance agreement that I tell all of my friends and family members to call them and be a part of. Because what this is, prior to the summer, prior to the winter, they come out twice a year and they check out your unit. They make sure it's cleaned out, that it's ready to go. There's no repairs that need to be taken care of, so that when you have to flip that AC on or when you flip that heater on, you're taken care of throughout that season. But if you have problems, and this is where right now is so important to be a part of the maintenance agreement, if you have problems like when it gets super hot out and your HVAC system goes out, your priority for them to come out and fix whatever your problems are. There are over 14,000 of these maintenance agreements throughout the area, so be a part of the 14,000 people that use Classic Air Care for their maintenance agreement. Give them a call today. Tell them Alex Ferrario sent you. You could schedule online also. It's Classic Air Care and ClassicAirCare.com.
Ooh, hoo, hoo, hoo. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line to get involved in the show. It is time for In or Out here on BK and Ferrario. Guys, big news in the NFL. CeeDee Lamb and the Dallas Cowboys have reached an agreement on a 4-year deal worth $136 million. He is now the second highest paid non-quarterback in NFL history, behind only Justin Jefferson. The deal also includes $38 million in a signing bonus. That is the biggest ever given to a wide receiver. In or out? This marks the end of Dak Prescott in Dallas after this season. Now that they have paid their all-pro wide receiver big-time money, they will do what Minnesota did, and they will have a rookie quarterback starting for them in 2025, Alex.
I'd say in, because if I'm the Dallas Cowboys, my two priorities were CeeDee Lamb and Micah Parsons. Dak Prescott was third on that list. I have my personal beliefs on Dak Prescott. I know others feel differently, but if you're Dallas, it sure seems like, all right, well, he just got all of that money. Micah Parsons is probably getting close to that, if not more, per year. There's no money left for Dak Prescott, so we're going to go about this another way. So I'll say in.
I'll say in as well. I think when you look at it, you want to have a weapon on the outside, and you want to have a just elite pass rusher. It's the one thing that we've seen can kind of disrupt the best quarterbacks in the NFL. Just ask Patrick Mahomes about Max Crosby with the Raiders. I think they're going to look at this and say, you know what, we can draft a rookie quarterback in a bad rookie quarterback class and say, you know what, we've got the pieces around him. We'll be able to find out early on and hopefully kind of prop him up a little bit. So, yeah, as Jimmy Johnson would say, how about them Cowboys? I'm in.
I'm in as well. I don't think it ends well for him. I think they will end up living to regret it. I think they will look back and say, man, we had a really good quarterback in Dak Prescott that now ended up going on to win a Super Bowl
with the Rams.
Somewhere else. I do not think that they will have the same amount of success in Dallas. I think Dak Prescott is a really good quarterback, and they're going to make a mistake in letting him walk, but I do think that's ultimately what happens here. Alex, what do you have for us for in or out?
Guys, in or out, one of Jordan Walker or Nolan Gorman are not a Cardinal by the start of next season.
Out. I think both of them will be here, and I think both will be in the starting lineup on opening day.
I'm out as well. I think they'll both be here. I think they're going to try and make this work. I think they try a youth movement, and like BK had kind of mentioned it earlier on in the show, if they don't get this to work with these young hitters, guys, they don't have the second wave coming. If they can make it work with Walker, Gorman, Newbar, if they can figure it out with those guys, they can go through like a 1-2 year down period and kind of have that, call it a retool if you want, but they can kind of go the youth movement and hopefully get this turned around. Those guys don't work. Guys, they get nothing in the minor leagues. I mean, nothing. It's J.J. Weatherholt, and that's about it. That's how you get into a rebuild. So I will say out. I think they're going to try and make it work, and hopefully it does work because covering the Cardinals that are bad for 10 years, gross.
Rebuild.
Oh, wait. Oh. Guys, in or out? Mike Shildt, San Diego Padres, are the most dangerous team in the playoff field as of right now.
Out. It is a wild card team. It is in the National League. It is the Arizona Diamondbacks. That's the team. T-Bone said it early in the season. He said if this team gets it figured out, they get their pitching back on track, they are the team to be feared. They have scored 700 runs this year. That offense is unbelievable,
and they're missing like three main pieces right now.
Yeah, and they have scored 53 more runs than any other team in the National League. Second best in the National League is the Dodgers at 648. Their offense is so good, man. That is the team that would scare the hell out of me if I am one of these teams going up against them in the National League. Dude, it's not out of the question that they could win the National League West. They are only a few games back right now of the Dodgers. I have not checked. They have later this week, 4-game series against the Dodgers. If they take care of business the next few days against New York, the Diamondbacks this weekend could overtake the Dodgers for first place in the National League West. That, to me, is the team that I think is the most dangerous.
I'm going to say out, and it's Phillies. I think Phillies are the type of team, and I know they're not playing their best baseball right now. They're the type of team, though, that knows they can turn it on when you get to October. And the way I look at their makeup is I think they're a danger to anybody that goes up against them, and it's a matter of following through.
I'm actually in because I like the Padres offense. They're going to get Tatis back here hopefully soon. Darvish just returned, and he's probably going to enter the rotation. If Darvish and Musgrove can kind of figure it out, you've got a three-headed monster in your rotation when you throw in Dylan Cease. And the one thing I think they have that puts them over the top of the Diamondbacks, their bullpen is legit scary. So I'm actually in. I think you're going to see San Diego, Arizona.
Not so much.
Yeah,
it's scary for them.
Yeah, I think you're going to see San Diego and potentially Arizona in the NLCS.
All right, guys, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line. We'll get to some of these from the text line right now. Also, the YouTube chat is available for you, youtube.com/101ESPN STL. In or out, Mike Shildt will get a standing ovation by Cardinals fans tonight. I'm in on this.
Do they give manager an opportunity for?
They'll find a way.
They'll probably do it during introductions.
Yeah, I guess. Or in between innings where they say, welcome back, Mike Shildt.
Yeah,
I'll say in on this.
They'll find a way.
Ollie finds a way. Ollie gets pissed when that moment happens.
I don't think Ollie does. I think Mo does. Ollie likes Mike Shildt. They have a really good relationship still.
Surely not. I'll say in, and I'll go even a step further. I bet we hear a chant that says we want Shildt.
Oh.
Now that
from the 20,000 people that are being pushed stadium tonight?
In the people that are dressed
faint.
The people that are dressed in
that
seats.
would bother Ollie.
Yeah.
Shildt.
I wouldn't be shocked if you heard that tonight.
Interesting.
Especially if they're getting clobbered in the first 3
I bet
innings.
you hear that tomorrow if they lose tonight.
Is it more likely we want Shildt or fire Mo?
We want Shildt.
We want Shildt. I think they've already done the whole week.
Yeah, they've done the fire Mo. I think they're lethargic to the point that they know Mo's not going anywhere until Mo decides.
I think it's just because I think a lot of the fan base just doesn't understand the Shildt firing. And because
understandably so, they never
because
explained
the Cardinals
it.
never explained it. So
Nobody was up front with
That
that.
was the beginning of their PR nightmares that have continued basically ever since that day. They have never been able to get back on track since then.
And at that point, Mo's probably checked out to where it's like, I don't need to explain myself. Welcome back to the too big for your britches moment.
done like 2 press conferences so far this year.
Still trying to get him on the show.
Would love to have Mo on the show. We'd love to talk to him.
Just called him out,
I was
didn't
told
you?
he was busy last week.
Hey, he probably was.
He'll be back with
There's a
us.
lot going on right now. 40-man
I'm
roster
sure we'll get him
decisions.
this week. Guys, in or out?
Not
Victor
after that
Scott
statement.
II has earned the center field job for the rest of the year. I say in.
I mean, I say in from the fact that he should be playing the center field position all year, so you find out who he is.
That's kind of where I'm
He
at.
doesn't really need to earn it anymore to me. There's nobody else that should be playing over him.
He's looked competitive at the plate, and that's been the goal.
Yeah, I'm in. I was a little worried. We talked about this on Friday. I was a little worried that, based on our conversation with Kylie McDaniel last week, that him being up here for a need wasn't good for his development. But because of what you just said there, he looks competitive. He at least looks like he has a fighting chance. Yeah. And that's why I think, you know what, it is better for his development to be up here right now. Early on in the season, he had no chance against
I think right now he can do what he learned, what Mason Wayne used as the last 6 weeks of the
100%.
season last year. This can be that opportunity for
100%.
Victor Scott. Earlier this year, I think you're totally right, T-Bone. He was too overwhelmed, and it actually ended up being a negative for him. Now he does appear to be like, he's at the threshold where you can learn from your mistakes.
Yeah.
You can learn from your failures, and you can take that into the offseason with you and try to improve from those. See how guys are pitching you. Find out how they're game planning against you. Where are my holes in my current swing? Try to fix those going into this offseason. I think it's worth it for the Cardinals. All right, couple more here. Guys, in or out, Doug Armstrong is not done this offseason. Perunovich and Tucker, one of those two, will be traded by opening night. I'm out. I think they just keep them and then try to put one of them through waivers.
Yeah, I mean, you're not trading Tucker. You're not getting anything back in return for Tucker, and Tucker's a good enough 7th or 8th defenseman to throw in there if there's injuries. I could see a situation where they trade Scott Perunovich if Broberg's here, and the problem is, like, again, you're not getting anything back in return, but if you try and put him through waivers, my guess is that guy gets claimed. So I'll say I'm in solely off the fact that, you know, maybe they just try and take an opportunity of say, hey, this guy's going to get a chance to play elsewhere. We'll take a 4th or 5th round draft pick for a Scott Perunovich.
Yeah, I'm in on it because I think you typically see these kind of moves happen right around training camp where your roster's kind of clogged up. You just want to give somebody a clean break and you trade him. I was actually shocked that they kept Bortuzzo all the way till they did last year. Remember, they traded him for like a 6th-round pick like 30 games in. Yeah. I thought he was going to be traded at training camp just because of what I just said. So I think that you're going to see that with one of Tucker or Perunovich.
He's Tanner Hendrickson. That is Alex Ferrario, and I'm Brandon Kiley. Coming up next, we are going to talk about the national media finally catching up on the stakes that the Cardinals have over the next few weeks. We'll get into that next here on 101 ESPN.
Terry Hendrickson here with a Sports Center update brought to you by Saliga Heating and Cooling. Cardinals back in action tonight as they start a 4-game set with the San Diego Padres. 6:45 will be first pitch as Kyle Gibson will be on the mound for St. Louis. And the big news out of the NFL today, the Dallas Cowboys and wide receiver CeeDee Lamb have agreed to a 4-year contract extension worth $136 million. The Sports Center update is brought to you by Saliga Heating and Cooling, an independent American Standard heating and air conditioning dealer.
So MLB.com did their list of the teams that have the most at stake down the stretch, Alex. Major League Baseball teams on the bubble that face the biggest questions. At number 1 on this list was the Seattle Mariners. They just fired their manager, so that seems fair to me. They've got some pretty significant questions to answer down the stretch. They have one of the best rotations in Major League Baseball. Unfortunately, their offense has stunk now for the better part of 2 seasons. Their names have not matched their actual production. Sounds familiar here in St. Louis. At number 2 on that list was the St. Louis Cardinals. And here's what they wrote, Alex, about the Cardinals. Quote, "This was a wild card team just 2 weeks ago, but the bottom has fallen out. Not only do veterans like Nolan Arenado and Paul Goldschmidt look to be on a rapid decline, but young players they were counting on, such as Jordan Walker and Nolan Gorman, have not developed as hoped. Team president John Mozeliak has been with the franchise for more than 3 decades and running the front office for nearly 20 years. But this would be a low point for the franchise with just 1 year left on his contract and a whole bunch of unfamiliar empty seats at Busch Stadium. Trouble is brewing if the Cardinals miss the playoffs again or even finish in last potentially. This franchise could look very, very different very, very soon," end quote.
Jim Bowden standing at home right now, just fist pump, be like, "Yeah, I told you."
He's like, "I told you this wasn't a playoff
Every
team.
damn article I wrote, I told you.
And you're on this here radio station. Alex, do you agree with those stakes? If the Cardinals were to finish this season around 500, miss the playoffs once again, how different do you think that the organization will look like by opening day, in your opinion?
I don't believe that it would look very different. At least if we're going off of just the front office and the management side of things. Unless Mo says that he's just done, I don't believe there's going to be any changes up top. Will there be changes to the roster? Probably. Hopefully they would enact just a youth movement of realizing that this is back-to-back years of being a 500 team. It's time to focus on the future with this. But I don't know how significant it's going to be in terms of, hey, we just missed the playoffs once again. We need to start from the top down and make changes. I think that only happens if Mo looks at it and says, I don't want to do this anymore. They've already got a successor in place. I'm just going to take my leave and let this guy take over. If you're asking me if I believe the Cardinals will do that, I don't buy into it. If you're asking me if they should, yes. I think exactly what the piece said in terms of the unfamiliar empty seats at Busch Stadium. If you've ever wanted a reason from up top to make significant changes from the top down, if I'm a owner of the Cardinals, it's that. Back-to-back years of watching the seats, the ticket sales, and watching a lot of empty seats at Busch Stadium decline, that's the biggest reason I would ever need.
Yeah, I've been kind of on the fence with this, but I think I'm now starting to lean towards they would make significant changes, and it's because of the empty seats. You know, we talk about it all the time, and the fans would, we'd get texts, we'd get mic drops about, I'm not going to go to the games, they're not winning. But Mo was good for business if you're the Cardinals because he was winning still. Even if he wasn't making the playoffs, he was still winning. And, if this team finishes kind of right around 500 and they're out of the playoffs, and if you look at the standings right now, they're like the 3rd team that's out on the outside looking in. That's not good for business. Mo's suddenly become this figure, whether you like it or not, that's become the hot button issue for Cardinals fans. And he's no longer good for business, which means people aren't coming out to the ballpark. It's hard to look at his resume now and say that guy can build a winner when he's missed the playoffs potentially for 5 of the last 9 years. So I think they would lean on the side of, you know what? Let's make a clean break. Let's go a different route. We're probably going to cut payroll anyways because of our RSN situation is still up in the air. Let's just have a new face kind of start from fresh here. I think they would make significant changes.
I think so too. I think Mo would walk away. I think he would say, you know what, it's time. It's time for all of us to go our separate ways. My guess is he'd just be reassigned with a new organization. He probably takes over on the business side of things. He, instead of directly reporting now on the baseball side to Bill DeWitt Jr., he would report to Bill DeWitt III. He would probably work alongside BD3 on the business side. That's just a guess.
Imagine being a ticket rep and being like, hi, I used to be the president of baseball operations, but now I just sell season tickets.
I just picture myself walking up to the box office there.
That might be the only job, the only role within the organization that would be worse for Mo than his current role is, hi, this is John Mozeliak, ticket rep for the St. Louis Cardinals. Would you like to re-up your season ticket package for the 2025 season?
Hi, this is John, and I'm like, is this John Mozeliak?
No, John M.
No, this is John Schmalak that's
totally
actually
different.
selling season tickets.
I think that after this season, if they finish at 500 or below, it's got to be a clean break. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to get exactly what you want in terms of whatever the next president of baseball operations decides to do, but at least it's different.
Clone.
At least it's different, man. And I think for a lot of Cardinals fans, they just want something different. Kind of like this year, you just couldn't bring back the same dudes in your rotation. Yep. Like Jack Flaherty, we all knew there was a real chance going into the season, Jack would have been the best guy to have as a part of this rotation. Like 1-for-1, Lance Lynn or Jack Flaherty. Who would you have rather had in the offseason? We all could have and did make the case for Jack Flaherty. But then we also came to the conclusion, you just got to do something different. It can't be the same names running out the same way as they did a year ago. They had to change it for change's sake. I think that's the case right now for the Cardinals with their president of baseball operations as well. And you can run into some issues by doing that, just making change for change. But right now, I think it's necessary for this organization.
Let me ask you this question. If that happens and Mo steps down and that's the change, they don't move on from Ali Marmol. They keep everything else the same. Does that make fans happier? Because I don't think it does. I think even if Mo goes, I think fans are still going to want to see a change. And I don't agree with it.
In terms of the manager?
I think fans are going to want to change
I think the biggest thing for fans is management, roster. Those two things. I think the manager makes people frustrated, but I think it's the losses that are piling up that make people more frustrated, and frankly, the lack of a direction. And people's biggest gripe, at least based on what we've seen from the text line and call or whatever, is that they think that Marmol is a Mo puppet. And if Mo no longer is in charge of the baseball operations, it's kind of hard to have that belief that he's the quote-unquote puppet for John Mozeliak when Mo is no longer in place, right? So I think there would definitely be some frustration there, but I think it would be potentially because they're losing again next year, more so than because they like specifically hate Ollie Marmol.
Because see, I think a large.
I also think there's a decent chance that if Mo goes, then Ollie's out.
I think a large portion of Cardinals fans, if Mo steps down, fired, however you want to frame it, if there's not changes to the coaching staff, I think Cardinals fans are still going to be displeased with their offseason.
He's Alex Ferrario. That's Tanner Hendrickson, and I'm Brandon Kiley. Hey, get signed up to play in this year's Fastlane Pick'em Challenge at 101ESPN.com. You can make your football picks each and every week. See if you can defeat the Fastlane and the dudes from the Rizzuto Show. Fastlane and the Riz Show throwing it down all season long this year, as they always do. You can get signed up to play right now at 101ESPN.com. Coming up next, we're going to give you a chance to score a pair of lawn tickets to see Sammy Hagar's sold-out show on August 31st at Hollywood Casino Amphitheater. So be sure to stay tuned for that. We'll give you a chance to win those tickets next year on 101 ESPN. Hey, in just a few minutes, we'll give you a chance to score a pair of tickets to see Sammy Hagar at the sold-out show August 31st, Hollywood Casino Amphitheater. Sammy will be joined by a bunch of different performers on stage as well. Saturday night, text in to win coming up here in just a few minutes. That text line is 314-399-9646. That is the Air Comfort Service text line to get involved in the show as always. You can always join us as well at the annual Blues and Brews, Friday, September 20th at the Anheuser-Busch Brewery. Get fired up for this blues season. Features live music, plus appearances from blues players, alumni, food trucks, 101 ESPN giveaways, and so much more. Tickets on sale right now for just $20. It's a really cool event. I'm going to be out there. Alex T-Bone going to be out there as well. We'll see you guys at this year's edition of the annual Blues and Brews Celebration, second annual. This is coming up on September 20th. Guys, before we give away those Sammy Hagar tickets, Cardinals back in action this evening. They will be going up against the San Diego Padres. This is a significant series for them, and it's a tough one. 4 big-time starters, all righties on the mound for San Diego. In terms of what you're looking for in this series, you've got Gibson, Michaelis, Palante, Gray as your starters. How are you going to be evaluating the Cardinals over the next 4 days? Because for me, it's a pass-fail. Like, I don't even care how it looks necessarily. You got to win 3 of these 4 games. Yeah. It's a high bar to clear. It's not going to be easy, but that's where you've put yourself.
Yeah, I mean, I'm done evaluating this team on certain areas. I know what your offense is. You could go like above 500 batting average with runners in scoring position in the series, and I still wouldn't buy into it. I know what your offense is. I know what your pitching is. To me, it's a matter of, are you winning or not? Are you stringing together wins? I'm looking at, you need to pick up 3 or 4, and if you don't, if you split, I'm not even okay with that. To me, if you split, that proves exactly what I believe you are, a 500 team, and it's why I just can't invest anything into it.
Yeah, I'm with you guys. Pass fail, you got to win 3 or 4. I am curious to see if they continue that trend that we talked about early on in the show of drawing their walks and being aggressive on the base paths to try and manufacture slug, because they will not slug in this series. They're going to have to manufacture it and then hopefully hit a single and score that runner from second. They're going to have to be super aggressive against the San Diego Padres.
Yeah,
super aggressive meaning don't swing at anything.
I hope they just play the matchups the way that they need to.
No
That's the biggest thing to me.
No Herrera.
I want to see more of Ivan Herrera. I think he should be in your starting lineup tonight. I don't think they'll do it, but I think he should be in the lineup tonight. I would like to see them deploy the right-handed bats coming off of the bench in the late innings. Yes, it's going to make people mad, but like, hey, Alec Burleson, if you're going up against a lefty late, and you've got some of these big-time lefty relievers that are coming out of their bullpen, let's see what the righties look like. Go with Tommy Pham there. Go with, even if it ends up being an Ivan Herrera coming off of the bench. Or, hell, Paul Goldschmidt coming off of the bench. And just platoon that spot at first base tonight. I'd be cool with that as well. They probably won't, but that's what I would like to see from them.
I'd also like to see Mike Shildt in a postgame for the Padres reference Brandon at some point.
Well, that won't happen, shouldn't happen. And
you going down to the ballpark to see your buddy today?
I'm not going to be available this week, unfortunately. I'm going to be with Wilson.
Yeah, I wonder why, right? Mike Shilt's in attendance. Got to avoid that one.
With Alex Ferrario and Tanner Hendrickson, I'm Brandon Kiley. It was good to be back in for a rare Monday here on the show.
Don't get used to it, though.
I'm out on Thursday and Friday. We're out next week for Monday because it is Labor Day. Hey, if you want a chance to win a pair of lawn tickets to see Sammy Hagar's sold-out show on August 31st, text in right now, 314-399-9646. That is the Air Comfort Service text line. If you are texter number 101, and you can tell us who the NLCS MVP was against the Cardinals back in 2019. The fighting Mike Shildt got to the NLCS back in 2019. Who was the NLCS MVP in that series? If you have the correct answer in your texture number 101, you are going home with that pair of tickets to see Sammy Hagar in that sold-out August 31st show. For Alex and T-Bone, I'm BK. What?
The gears were grinding. I was just watching T-Bone's face. T-Bone has no clue.
I have no idea.
I was just watching the smirk he made, and he's like, yeah, there was no NLCS MVP.
I know who should have won it, but I don't think he did.
We'll talk to you guys tomorrow at 11. Fastlane coming up next here on 101 ESPN.
No, you tell me. Who would you go to?